What's up, everyone? My name is Jameson Wellborn. Welcome to another episode of Fire's Fire. As always, I'm joined by my co-host RJ Ellis and Dr. Brian Paul. Before we
What's up,
jump into
everybody?
things with our guest that I'm tremendously excited about, I wanted to give a big shout out to Green Tech Environmental. I was recently out with them at the Canadian Cannabis Summit in Kelowna. Had an absolutely awesome time. If you want to check out any super high-end air filtration products, make sure you check them out. The founder of that company is as passionate about air filtration as I am about hash. But today we're joined by Todd of Resin Ranch Extractions. I'm incredibly excited. I first became aware of Todd a few years ago through his IG, and then I listened to his episode on the Hashishian and was really honestly impressed with his honesty and the amount that he was willing to share and talk about the real truth of the industry. So please join me in welcoming to the show. Todd, thank you so much for taking the time to join us, man.
Howdy, guys. How you doing today?
Good, man. Good.
Thanks for joining us, man. It's direct from the fields. We see all the hard work you're putting in today.
Yeah, he's about to fire the excavator back up, so I had to find a new spot.
Yeah, you've been busy.
Is that what you call your arms?
They're huge.
Oh man,
Nice.
I've been following along with your Instagram story, and I know you've been super busy at the farm today, and definitely want to dive into some of that stuff later. But the first thing we always like to get into on the show is before we talk about the actual products, we would like to know a little bit about the maker. And I know from listening to other interviews you've had, you're from Wisconsin. I'd love to learn a little bit more about what growing up was like and what life was like there in the early days.
All right. Todd, Resin Ranch Extraction, coming live from my property here in Nevada County, California. All right. So, I'm originally from Wisconsin, born in 1979. So I'm getting to be an old man here. Grew up in southeast Wisconsin, so like about 30 miles outside of Milwaukee, kind of rural area. Was actually
Now, don't people some people consider Wisconsin part of Canada?
No. You got, not that I know of. I mean, you got the UP is still north of Wisconsin, so and all Lake Superior.
No, I've had some friends from Wisconsin. The feel from
What?
Wisconsin, the vibe from Wisconsin is very Canadian.
I was gonna say up north, you probably wouldn't know the difference if you were in Canada.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, you're not actually connected. I mean, the vibe is real.
Yeah, it's very, very UP, we call it, Upper Peninsula. Upers, hey there, with the accent. But so growing up grew up kind of rural, pretty much surrounded by cornfields, free range parenting, no bike helmets, let us run around outside all day, holler at us out the door when it was time to come home kind of deal when we were kids. I spent all my time outside, riding bikes, skateboarding, snowboarding, all that fun stuff. Graduated high school in 1998. I went to Mukwonago, and I ended up actually graduating high school and just bouncing out to Colorado to be a snowboard bum. Didn't go to college.
Where was cannabis at this point? Were you a late
introduction
to cannabis, or what were your first experiences like?
Yeah, keep me on track, and if I miss
bro,
anything.
I got you. I'm here for you, bro.
Appreciate it, because my brain's in a million places right now.
No problem.
So it was, it was definitely looked at as, a drug, like, for sure back then. I mean, I probably started smoking a little bit. Total Mexican brickweed was all there was back then. I was probably like 13, 14 years old, probably like 7th grade. And, we'd get little dime bags from a dude at school and smoke them in a little. I used to take CO2 cartridges and I'd drill a hole in one, the spent ones, and then cut the top off the other one and make a bowl and just stick it in there. Totally, like, who knows what the fuck I was doing to my lungs.
There's some nice heavy metals in there for you.
MacGyver ghetto shit.
Super ghetto. I mean, it was, Wisconsin in the 90s. There's no weed culture. There still isn't any weed culture,
Was it an
total,
immediate
total hush hush. What's that?
Was it an immediate love or affinity for the plant your first time using it, or was it something?
Oh
that
yeah,
took a
dude,
little bit of time?
I was done right away. I'm pretty high strung. Was a really high strung kid, hard to find healthy areas to put that energy, to be honest. So that's why I was constantly running around. Let me know if the machine is too loud and I'll go inside, but I might get better connection out here. And
We're hearing okay.
yeah, what was I saying? Yeah, I mean, I was hooked right away because it was like, okay, I'm calm, my brain's not spinning anymore, like probably.
So were you chronic
probably
immediately?
had a little bit of hyperactivity.
For sure.
What's that?
Were you chronic immediately? Like, did you start? Was it okay? This is something that I want in my life all the time and regularly, or did that slowly progress throughout your introduction to cannabis?
I think. All right, we'll just be fucking flat out honest. I'm a totally addictive personality. I am a drug addict. I've been clean for 15 years, but I'm a drug addict. So that addictive personality, yeah, I was pretty much as I could, as often as I could, right out the gate. By the time I was a freshman in high school, that's when I could for sure definitely say it was a daily activity. Probably starting in high school, early in high school. And then I actually went through a little period there, a little bit my junior year. I didn't smoke at all. I was drinking a lot, to be totally honest. And then it came back around as I slowly stopped drinking and snowboarding more aggressively and putting more of my effort into that and focusing on that. And this is originally, snowboarding was what I wanted to do with my life. I want to go be a professional snowboarder kind of thing,
What did you ride? Did you ride park or pipe or what you ride?
Everything. Back then there was, when I started snowboarding, no mountains allowed it. There was one was up in northern Wisconsin, might even be in Michigan technically, that allowed it back then. And yeah, so it wasn't definitely got into snowboarding before it was popular. So we rode what we could. So back then people want to ask you if you rode park, pipe, or terrain. Well, I grew up in southeast Wisconsin, so we pretty much rode on old landfills that they covered that was now a huge mountain. They'd put some ski lifts on it.
Bro, that sounds like Ontario. That's where I grew up. That's like I grew up skiing.
Yeah, you'd be lucky if you could talk the owner into letting you build a little jump or something like that, So you learned to ride everything. And so yeah, I was pretty well-rounded. Now in my older age, I definitely try to stay out of the half pipe in the park though. But most of the time I was in Colorado, I would say we were definitely rode more park, I think, I would say.
Did you see a lot of the cannabis and skate community / snowboard community really coming together at that time, or was it more so just something you enjoyed because you got injured?
So I think when it all kind of came together for me was when I took a trip out to Colorado when I was about a sophomore or something like that. My parents took me out there and I brought one of my friends with, and immediately you could just you could tell that people were smoking weed. You could smell it on the hill, and people were way more open about it, and randomly just asked a dude at the gas station hey, where do we get some weed around here? And dude hooked us up with an eighth right over the counter, and I was like, okay, damn, there's actually a somewhat of a cannabis community here that definitely is super tight knit with the snowboard and skateboard community. They definitely are go hand in hand for sure. Absolutely. So that's when all of it kind of came together for me that oh man, I could go to Colorado, I could smoke weed, really good weed, and there's a weed culture, and I can snowboard. So I kind of got the best of both worlds,
100%. That must have been a big change going from Wisconsin to Colorado. What was that a bit of a culture shock for you, or were you more or less ready for what you were walking into?
Yeah, I think I was ready for that culture shock. You know,
Nice.
like that's the change I was looking for. Even now, Wisconsin is so, it's alcohol, man. It's alcohol. Everybody drinks. You've got the Tavern League that like runs everything, and they're probably the main reason you don't have any sort of legislation in Wisconsin, is because the Tavern League has so much power. And it was like, people definitely, certain groups frowned down on your cannabis use, like you kept it hush hush.
Yeah.
And so like after I moved out to Colorado, I only spent a season, and then I went back to Wisconsin for a few years, and I learned a trade, construction, carpenter. And that definitely, like, they were drinkers, you know, and they looked at me. They used to call me a hippie, just solely based on the fact that I smoked weed. You know, that was their only correlation to me being a hippie. It's just so.
And now look at you today on a farm digging up hugel beds.
I know. Now I'm turning into one, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it was so alcohol focused, and I was more cannabis focused. I think I realized really early that like this can help people. This is more than just getting high, you know.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's kind of what we were doing as high school kids, but there was more to it even back then. You just felt it like in my soul that there's
100%.
like this is gonna be with me for a long time, you know. And lo and behold, here we are.
Absolutely. I think a lot of us have like a similar story like that. So was your first cultivation in Wisconsin, or was it in Colorado?
We were literally just talking about that at lunch. My first cultivation technically would be in Wisconsin.
Nice. Can you talk to us about that and what that looked like?
Yeah, it's a great story. So where I grew up, you know, was fairly rural. So we had, you know, cornfield on one side, surrounded by this huge tree line, and there happened to be this old garden that nobody had used for a long time and was way overgrown. So I was like, I'll clear a patch in the middle of it, you know, where nobody can see, and I'm going to try and grow some weed in there. So it was totally Mexican brickweed seed. You know, we got cut straight off the block brickweed, you know, and you'd go and de-seed it and stem the whole bag, you know, so you could just dip in and roll joints. And I was like, hey, I'll pop some of these. So I popped them on top of my old tree fort from when I was a kid, which is pretty cool. You know, we did it on top of the tree fort. And then
that is very cool, bro.
Yeah, we had 16 plants, and I took those and I planted them out in the spot in the old garden, and I had them like 4 inches apart. Like, you know, no idea what the hell I'm doing. And luckily, I guess I would say luckily, between bugs and pests or whatever, rodents, whatever, and my friends going down there to look at the pot plants and not even knowing what they're looking at and actually stepping on them, I ended up with 1 plant left, and it actually was a female. Turned out to be a female. So I grew that thing, and I was big into reading High Times back then. I had a good friend of mine, his dad worked at a company that they print magazines, and High Times was one of the ones they print, so he'd bring them home, and I'd read them at school. And I remember reading this thing about, they called it, quote unquote, black bagging, which was like the really early versions of pulling tarp, doing depths.
Black boxing, yeah.
Like the guys in Humboldt would grow in trees, you know, and they'd crawl up there and throw a bag over it or a black box, you know, whatever. So, and it said to put the bag over it and leave it for 48 hours to get it to flip into flower, and then take the bag off and just let it do its thing. And it totally worked. And I never weighed anything, but I'm going to guess I got like about a QP off of it. Harvested way early, now that I look back on it. But still, at that time was, you know, we were smoking Mexican brickweed. So we had this, you know, a 1/4 pound of unseeded, like, super heady weed. It was great.
That's
And
awesome.
then when I was in Colorado, the second time I actually moved out there when I was like 22, I had a good friend. I have a good friend who had rheumatoid arthritis really bad. And he was one of like the first 300 or so people to get a medical card in Colorado. And back then, you know, they didn't have dispensaries or anything. The whole system was just basically so you could grow your own cannabis, you know, and there was no selling. There was a caregiver system, I remember vaguely. Obviously, don't quote me on any of this stuff because it was a long time ago now. So we just started in his. He had a closet. I was a carpenter, so he was like, "Hey, help me put this, you know, exhaust fan in here and hang this light and all this stuff, you know." And it was like an exhaust fan for a bathroom, not, you know, like a growing exhaust fan, but the biggest one we could find, kind of thing, you know. And it was this super janky, have to like move plants out here to veg during the day and then put them in here at night kind of thing, and like shuffling plants around at weird times of day. And we harvested a plant from his house and it was great. Like, the girl I was dating at the time, her sister had just gotten back from Amsterdam, and she was like, "This is like as good as anything that we got over there." So, you know, that's kind of where I set my bar. I was like, all right, we did all right.
That's awesome.
And he had a friend that had been growing for a while, so, you know, we had a little bit of guidance, and we at least got some decent cuts right off the bat. AK-47 actually was like the first thing we kind of really grew. And as that kind of blossomed a little bit, we decided, I had an empty bedroom at my house, so we decided, all right, well, we'll veg plants at his house and we'll flower them at my house. So then that meant, you know, moving them in the middle of winter in hot water heater boxes that were insulated in the back of my truck, because I had a construction company, you know, with the magnets on it and everything. So, you know, it looked like nothing out of the ordinary. And we rocked that for, you know, at least a good year, I would say, before, you know, roommate troubles and life issues start getting in the way a little bit, you know, and kind of had to abandon that for a little bit.
Yeah. So at this point, Todd, are you growing for flower in Colorado? Like you're smoking flower, or have
Yeah.
concentrates
At
come
that
into
point,
play yet?
at that point, like there was, at least in the circles I was running, there wasn't, like, hash was so rare. And if you got it, it was like, you know, some black tarry. It was like $20 a gram, you know, and even looking back on it now, it was not that great a hash at all, even for like low grade hash. Or you would get, every once in a while, these guys would come around with, quote unquote, call it honey oil. And it was like this super, super clear, a little bit of a yellow tint to it, you know, and we would just kind of put that on top of bowls. And that's really all there was. Like, I didn't get into hash until I was living back in Wisconsin again.
Was this still reeking like alcohol, that honey, or was it like actually proper product back then?
Yeah, it's, if I think back on it, I think it was probably pretty alcohol-y.
Yeah,
like
sure.
I remember the first time putting a flame to it, it would kind of flame up a little bit on the bowl.
Makes sense.
So,
Makes
you know,
sense. For
now
sure makes sense.
this is like the first time I've even thought about those times since those times. So, you know, thinking back on it, yeah, it's like that was probably not very proper stuff. But
So what made
That's what it
you?
was, though.
you know, it was probably 2000, call it 2002, 2003, maybe to 2005-ish.
So what made you move back to Wisconsin? What prompted that move?
Well, once again, just total honesty, because, you know, that's honestly the way I roll. I ended up getting myself into a pretty good pill problem. And I was actually with my wife at the time, and she had a good job offer back in Wisconsin working for Summerfest. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. They're one of the biggest outdoor music festivals. And I had my old contractor I used to work for, a really close family friend, you know, I called him and he was like, yeah, if you come back, you always got a job, you know? So I was like, shit, I should probably get out of this bad situation that I'm in and go back there, you know, and try and straighten my life up. And moving didn't help. But I got myself straight pretty quick after moving back to Wisconsin. I was close to family, you know, and they were witnessing it firsthand now. So my parents, God bless them, offered up, you know, hey, we'll pay for rehab if you go. So I was like, let's do it. And I've never looked back. That was March 5th, 2008.
That's
and
awesome.
I've been clean ever since. So
Awesome.
barely drink at all. But cannabis, on that subject a little bit more, cannabis is something I pretty much have to have in my life. And when I went to rehab, that whole week that I was there, they were convinced that like the opiates weren't going to be my issue. It was going to be, you know, not being able to smoke weed. And my whole time I was like, I have no interest in not smoking cannabis, you guys. That is not at all the same thing as this other crap I was doing.
Yeah,
you know, like there's so much good in the cannabis and just bad in the other stuff. And I stuck it out like another 3 or 4 days after I got out and was like, just like, you know, the anxiety starts to kick in again and all that shit. If you've ever been down the whole opiate road, and it's like, you know what, let's try the weed. And it was like, all right, man, this is why I smoke this stuff. This is why I have this stuff in my life. You know, like definitely, I think without cannabis, I probably wouldn't be here talking to you guys, obviously because of cannabis, but I mean, because of, you know,
I
other
feel
things.
what you're saying. Yeah.
I probably wouldn't have been able to keep my life straight, I don't think.
Yeah.
Without it.
Dude, that's so awesome to hear.
Something to focus my attention and energy on in my downtime back then, you know, was a huge thing. Idle hands make the devil's work, you know.
Absolutely.
It's really true with me. That's why I'm like out here doing this stuff all the time.
100%. So what, once you're beyond that, you're living clean, what prompted that move to Cali?
Oh yeah. So, all right. So yeah, I moved back to Wisconsin, you know, and got my life going straight again. Actually started another business. So I had another construction company going, and I don't want to, there might be some details I have to leave out, even though I don't think my mom will ever see this, but I had an opportunity, you know, getting a bag of weed in Wisconsin's ridiculous. Like, oh yeah, I'll have it tomorrow, you know, and then it's $120 a quarter for some, you know, crappy beasters or just whatever. And I had seen the Colorado life and grown a little bit and was like, this is ridiculous. I had a little space at somebody's house that I could do something, and was like, hey, they actually came to me and were like, hey, you want to, you know, do a little something in here? That way we don't have to be constantly, you know, chasing these guys down for a shitty sack of weed. And so we did that. Just I'll buy the equipment, I'll do the growing, you know, and we'll just split this down the middle. And we did that for a while, probably like a good year and a half, maybe even 2 years. And we started getting into hash at that time. Started like getting into BHO a little bit and stuff. And then I got my own place and started doing like the whole basement, blowing up basement situation.
What's your setup look like? Like, were you the single-ended vertical?
Yeah, single-ended vented hoods.
Yeah.
The first one was in an attic, actually, which I don't ever recommend anybody doing. But in Wisconsin, it was great in the winter because I would like direct vent those hoods and pull the cold, you know, 10-degree air from outside. And I'd actually have to run a heater sometimes. So I could bang out like 2,000, or, you know, I never ran 1,000-watt hoods, usually 600. So I'd have like two 600s in this tiny little space. And I'd be able to keep it cool because we were direct venting it with cold air. you
Yeah.
know. Back then, it was all ventilated rooms. None of this closed room stuff with the AC and the D-hum. Didn't even have D-hums back then. Just the basement would stay moist enough, kind of thing. And yeah, I was just doing I would do these little 1,200 watt rooms side by side and on an alternate harvest, and harvest every 2 months or so, month and
What
a
were you
half
doing
apart.
What were
Get
you doing for
maybe
odor mitigation?
what's that?
What were you doing for odor mitigation at that point? Like, I know carbon filters weren't out at that point. What were you? How were you?
Carbon filters, and back then everybody was rocking ozone generators.
Yeah.
And you'd feed that right into your exhaust line, and anything that came through the light and went out, was scrubbed with the ozone, which now we know was probably horrible for us. But who knows if it was good for the plants either,
So
but
you have
that's where we
go ahead.
started getting into hash.
Yeah.
Was in that time.
And when you say starting getting into hash, do you mean selecting and pheno hunting for lands that mechanically separate well, or what? Just sort of focusing on knowing the whole crop.
It all started. I was on the forums a lot, like Roll It Up and IC Mag, and God, what's the other one? I can't even remember that I was on a lot, but we were on there, and I started seeing, actually back it up a little bit. I got to remember this properly because it's actually important hash history, right? No, before that, I was seeing videos on, just watching as random weed videos that I could find on YouTube, and that's where I found the Mendo Hideout and the Jorge Cervantes videos, but that's a whole nother subject. And I was seeing people dabbing, and I didn't even really, because they didn't show the whole process. They just showed, and that was with those domed nails back then, the titanium or glass domed nails. So you never even really saw the hash necessarily. You just saw them smoking this rig. And I was like, okay, that's, that looks fun. And I went out to Las Vegas with actually my wife now, which we weren't together at the time, but really good friends. And she was out there buying stuff for her dad's store. And there was also this huge glass show. And we went to the glass show, and I got a dab rig for $15. I was like, shit, $15, I'll buy this thing. And, even if I don't use it, it's only $15. So I got it home, and actually, this is hilarious, man. The first thing I did with it was put weed on it. I had no idea what I was doing. No idea. So I'm heating up this nail, and then I'm dropping weed on it, and it's making a mess, and this just sucks, dude. What the fuck is this, So I started watching dabbing videos on YouTube, and I come across this how to make BHO, and the guy was actually winterizing it after with Everclear. So I was like, okay, this is cool. And then I kind of got onto the forums and started talking to people about okay, so I can actually make this shit myself, started figuring out how to actually make the shit somewhat properly. And we were off to the races with some glass tubes and some shitty trim, and a small little 3-gallon vacuum chamber bucket thing, those setups they used to sell. And yeah, man, we were off to the races. And I want to say though that my first BHO run I think was pretty proper, because I somewhat knew about this whole purging and parts per million thing. And the first batch we actually did was winterized, so we collected it all up.
Before your first batch, you were way ahead of the game. Way ahead of the game.
Right?
You
That's
any
what
of
I
that,
felt like.
way ahead of the game.
So that Everclear, that second Everclear winterization, totally stripped any terps, but you had clean BHO, real nice clear gold sheets, you know, that like if I ran into anybody else in the area that actually knew what BHO was, they would be like, nah, bro, that's not BHO, this is. And they'd show me some straight poop soup, you know, like that was the term, right? Poop soup. And it was just like, okay, I'm kind of in my own league, you know, I'm in my own league over here. And then I ran into Bubble Man videos, and these guys are dabbing water hash. I'm like, that shit we used to buy back in the day, that like black garbage, they're dabbing this stuff. And I started watching him and Johnny Burfello, you know, doing their wash videos, you know, using snow sometimes or whatever. And was like, well, shit, I guess I should cross that bridge again, you know? Because I always leaned towards the organic side. And even with the BHO from day one, my mentality was like, I'm doing all this effort to kind of do this organically, and then I'm washing it with a chemical. Like that just seems weird, you know? So I started watching the water hash videos. And the first run of water hash we did, me and my buddy that was helping me at the time, we had the bags stacked backwards. We had the 25U on top. And we had that thing full of water, barely dripping. Didn't know, you know, how any tech to get the water to drain. Literally from a pulley on the ceiling in the basement, and we let it hang there for like 4 hours and drain. And I was just like, this is horrible. And in that time, realized that, holy shit, we have these bags stacked backwards. So after that, we collected everything up and re-ran it through the bags the right way, you know. It just had some crap, dude. And I was
backwash
like,
stack.
Yeah,
A little early
garbage.
days backwash stack.
Yeah, man, like just no idea what I'm doing. Like, this is garbage, you know. So we kind of did some more BHO, and then it was the dry sift. If I'm thinking back, it was the dry sift that changed everything. Now I'm starting to see videos of guys, you know. God, what's his name? D420K. He goes by.
Shout out to you.
Remember that guy?
The Joe Gardner video with Bubble Man.
Yeah, doing the carding and the DVD static thing, and the iPhone card or whatever, like, gave you the best collection and all this stuff. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna get into this. And Bubble Man, you know, bless his heart for being open about the information back then. You could watch his videos, and if you paid attention, he didn't explain to you, use this screen, this screen, this screen. But if you paid attention, he told you, you know, just not directly like directions 1, 2, 3. He told you. So I figured out what screens to get, and I found just randomly it was Pocono screens right off the bat when I did, you know, a silk screen search or whatever, and got like a 196 LPI and a 110 LPI, and threw some training day across it from DNA Genetics. Just trim, a little bit of trim, and worked it a little bit, you know, did like one pass with the DVD, carded it for a little bit, and dabbed it. And holy shit, this smokes great. This bubbles, like, this looks like the videos I'm watching, you know? Okay, I'm onto something here. And I really think I got kind of lucky out of the gate that the strain happened to just be good for dry sift, kind of. Yeah. You know, so when you're on a really good dry sift screen, all these steps are pretty easy, or a lot easier, I should say. So I feel like I got a little lucky. So it immediately jumped me from, like, say, poop soup to, like, boom, I'm up here making melt now. You know, I would say probably like a 3.5 to 4.5 star would probably be rated these days.
Did you immediately jump into sifting, get a number of screens, and start drying your material, or were you doing like more of what Johnny B likes to do, where it's just first bounce and then continues to work with the material in other ways?
Okay, so yeah, that's a good question. Back then we were drying everything. I wasn't really onto fresh frozen yet. We had heard about it with BHO, and I had done it a little bit, but it was like, you know, at the time it was like, wow, that's a lot of material to like put up to do this, when you know, I didn't really sell my stuff. It was more about having it and not having to pay for it, and having it for like, you know, some friends, a few friends and family a little bit, and them not having to get dragged over the coals for it more than selling it. But still, it was like, that's kind of a lot to put up for this, you know, the whole fresh frozen thing. So that was like way, just a little whisper back there, you know, kind of had heard of it. So we were drying everything and trimming it. So I decided, I think it was Johnny B probably that I saw doing it and just trimming over a screen, you know. So we would trim everything over a screen. And then we'd get our smokable flour, and then I would take that trim and I would work with that usually. So, you know, we'd get that. I wasn't even separating it back then, that if you want to call it first bounce cream, just from us trimming over the screen, you actually got a pretty decent amount. And then it was, you know, it was just working trim really, and getting, you know, like 5-6 grams was like, that was huge. You know, if I had 6 grams of SIF, that was like, wow, this is going to last me probably 2 months. You know,
It's a lot of work
back then.
It's a lot of work to get that 5 or 6 grams.
Yeah, for sure.
It is.
So what came next, Todd? Did you continue to refine and hone your skills there, or I remember listening to, I think it was the hashish. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, where I was going with that is that it was the dry sift that I saw, that I got to witness that melt, and like, okay, stuff bubbles and it tastes good and all that, and like, this is probably what the water hash guys are shooting for. Like, this is probably the quality that they're shooting for. So let's try this again. You know, let's try and use better material this time. So I put some fresh bud aside that was dried already, but then put into the freezer to, you know, to kind of keep it good. And much, much, much better turnout that time. We were really gentle with it. We had the bags stacked right. At this point, I had watched enough Bubble Man videos to know the whole like bounce tech to bounce the bags to get them to drain kind of thing. And it was, you know, really small amounts, but good. Like it, you know, okay, this is a lot better. So I started messing around with the water hash a little more, but still not much, just kind of here and there. It was still more, it was like dry sift for myself. I was producing dry sift for myself, you know, and if there was anything left over, maybe we'll make a little bit of water hash, you know. And then I had a friend that I grew up with that was living in California come back to Wisconsin, and I hadn't talked to him in years, and he called me out of the blue and, you know, hey, I'm looking for a sack, you know, can you help me out? I'm in town for my grandpa's funeral thing. And I was like, yeah, come over, I got you. And as soon as I handed him the bag, he was like, you're growing, aren't you? And I was like, no, bro, like, what are you talking about? And he's like, dude, there ain't nothing like this in Wisconsin, you know? And I was like, yeah, okay, I am. And then he's all, oh, bro, like, I'm out in California and we're like doing all this shit and we want to start a delivery service in Sacramento. And, you know, we're running packs to LA and making all this money and stuff. And like, bro, you got to come out. Like, you got skill. Like, you got to come out. So he talked me into it, you know, and I was, by the time I left, I was like 36, 37 years old, running a construction company. And it was like, I always, all this time, I always wanted to just grow big plants outside. Like, I watched those Jorge videos and saw Joey Berger, like these huge plants, and was like, I just want to do that sometime, and never thought I would, you know. It was just like, that'd be cool to do kind of thing. And then my friend Brad lands in my lap and like, yo, come out to California, you know, like, I'll take you up there, dude, and show you this shit, like, you know. So I was like, all right, let's do it. Gave up the construction company and packed my shit, and thought my parents were going to disown me for giving up the successful construction company to go, you know, smoke and grow weed. And
how long ago was this? Like 7-8 years?
What's that?
How long ago was this?
that would have been, I moved out here in September 2015.
Dope.
So
That's
yeah,
awesome.
7 years ago. So yeah, and so I came out here, man. You know.
So was that your
And
first time ever out west, or had you been in Cali and kind of absorbed a bit of that culture before?
Only time I'd been to Cali prior was when I was a little kid, like maybe 5th or 6th grade, something like that.
Yeah.
Probably even younger.
Yeah.
And I have my godmother lives in LA, and she's been down there for a while, so we're out visiting her. And then I came out here to Mammoth for a wedding and snowboarding.
Yeah.
And like, you know, I didn't really notice that there was any more weed culture than there was in Colorado at the time. I didn't know much about the whole 215 thing. You know, I didn't know that much about it, you know, back then when I was out here. So so this, you know, coming back out, then that was.
What was that like for you? Was that culture shock, like getting north of San Fran and seeing what life was like up there?
A little bit. I mean, it's definitely North Woods feeling, like the average person's pretty similar to the average person in northern Wisconsin, I think, except for the fact that they grow cannabis. But like the first time we went out to Humboldt, you know, to go buy some weed to get this whole delivery service thing started, I was like, damn, okay, wow, dude. Like, people don't understand rural until you see Northern California. Like, I thought I'd been in the backwoods. It's so much deeper in Humboldt and Mendo in Northern California, man. It is so deep. And I remember texting my mom, like, here's the location, the area that I'm going. Like, if you don't hear from me in 2 days, you know, kind of thing. Because I didn't know yet, you know, that, like, the people are actually super cool.
Oh, yeah. There's no cell phone reception. Like, there's no calling.
Yeah, and then there's that. You know, we went out to Honeydew. I don't know how familiar you guys are with NorCal, but it's out there. Just put my sweatshirt on here quick. And so we went out there, you know, just hunting for packs, and he knew some people. We spent like a week in tents out on the coast, out by the Lost Coast trailhead, and like roughed it. And yeah, dude, some like, it was fun. Like, I thought I was doing some like real like wild like George Young type smuggling type, you know, like, wow, this is really some heavy shit. Not, you know, now
guerrilla shit.
I look back, it's like, whatever, dude. Those people are so chill, and there's so much weed in those hills, you know. But it was my first time seeing any of that kind of stuff, and didn't really get to go onto a farm at that point. He kind of did more of that, and I kind of hung back, and then would meet up with him and whoever he was meeting up at the country store or whatever it was, you know. But that situation did not last long.
Okay.
So I was living in Folsom. Before I get into that, we actually, this is where kind of Resin Ranch started, was when we were getting the delivery service started. I was already kind of fucking around with rosin, with, you know, the hair straightener tech, you know, back then. Was kind of messing around with it a little bit, you know. Was telling the guys who were doing the whole delivery service with, like, yeah, dude, non-solvent, like, it's gonna be the future, you know. Like, I didn't really know what I was talking about, but I guess I knew what I was talking about, you know. And
did you see it from Soil Grown? Did you see that Soil Grown video, or was it Hash Church, or how?
It was Hash Church. I was a Hash Church follower. Forgot all that. I was hardcore, watched Hash Church every weekend. That definitely helped me step my game up through all of this, you know, back then.
Shout out Bubble Man. There's very few people that come on our show that don't have something, you know, some part of their journey involved with watching a Bubble Man video or meeting Bubble Man.
And again, Hash Church was like, yeah, it was like 4 hours long, but if you watched and you listened, like there was some bombs dropped here and there, like tech bombs. And if you were smart enough to be able to take that information and take it home and apply it, you know, I think there was some people that really jumped leaps and bounds forward like me, just because of some of the tech things that I heard on there, you know, with like static sifting or just what, I can't even think of specific things at this point, but it was Hash Church, man, really. It really got that going. But with the delivery service, I quickly realized that, like, okay, the best overhead is going to be us doing our own thing, like us growing our own weed, us making our own products, you know. So I was like, let's buy some trim and let's make some shit. So we went up to Humboldt and we bought like 100 pounds of trim from this lady. And it was like a bunch of sour diesel and Candyland. It was the Candyland that Dank Duchess did that article about me in Weed World magazine on. And it was the sour D trim that I gave Cuban that got me recognized and shout out on Hash Church. But we brought that stuff home, and I spent like a week in the rain, outside in the rain, running this stuff through 5-gallon, you know, a stack of 5-gallon wash machines, and get this stuff all processed and press a bunch of stuff. And like, as soon as we get done with that, and we're about to launch the website for the delivery service and all this stuff, my buddy that got me out here goes batshit crazy. Like, I thought he was smoking meth. Like, just crazy. And I find out later that he's severely bipolar and wasn't taking his medication. But he ended up kicking me out of the house, telling me I'm arrogant, I got a big ego, I don't know shit about this business, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, yada, 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 and kicked me out of the house. So I've been in California like a month and a half, 2 months at this point. I don't know anybody, you know, except for this girl that he brought back from Humboldt and was kind of hanging out with, and he kicked her out too. And she had made a deal with us to stay for the winter.
Yeah.
And now she's out on the street too, you know? So I'm like, well, shit, instead of us both paddling up river here, let's at least like split a hotel room or something for a little bit until we can kind of figure out where we're going from here, you know?
Sure.
And I took my half of that trim and that stuff, and I got my shit out of there and went and hung out in a hotel room and waited for Emerald Cup. That was 2015 Emerald Cup. And I was over it, man. I was like, fuck California. I got like a couple grand left in my name. I'm going back to Wisconsin. I can get myself back there. I've got work waiting for me because I had my own construction company. You know, People are still calling me. So I'm like, I'm just over it. I'm like, this place sucks. Like, screw, this isn't for me. And went to Emerald Cup because this girl talked me into it. She was like, you got to go to Emerald Cup. Like, she, you know, and bless her, because she had been trimming up in Humboldt and had kind of at least seen stuff firsthand more than me, and was like always telling me, like, I've never seen stuff like yours. Like, I see these products all the time, but I've never seen it like your quality, you know? So she's like, go, you got to go. And I knew back then from watching Hash Church that, like, kind of the thing to do was go to these events and go to the people that, you know, are on Hash Church and have big names like Jibs and Cuban and Frenchie, and gift them some hash, you know, and hopefully they'll give you a shout out, you know, because it was, if I remember it was like DNA on Hash Church. It was like, dude, you got this Cuban guy, he makes this fucking amazing sift, like, you know, like crazy. And then Cuban's, you know, next thing you know, he's huge. So I'm like, all right, this is what I got to do. Yeah. And went to Emerald Cup, and the weather was shitty, and I gave hash to everybody, Jibs, Frenchie, anybody that had a brand or a booth back then, and pretty much everybody kind of ignored me. And that's nothing negative towards those guys, because now that I'm sitting in their positions, I fully understand it. Like, it's just all day long, people like, try my hash, try my hash, try my hash, try my hash, you know?
And it's like, it's 99 out of 100 that actually like drop a bomb on your table.
Yeah.
So,
Sure.
you know, I knowing that, I try to look at everything everybody wants me to when I do any sort of event to give them that respect that I wanted, but it's hard sometimes. But anyhow, moving on. So I you know, I didn't see Cuban or anything. He didn't have a booth, and we're walking around. We're about to leave, I think. It was raining, and I see Cuban Grower over there on a picnic table with some friends smoking some hash. And I'm like, all right, well, that's the dry sift guy. The only other person I gave dry sift to was Frenchie because I knew he would appreciate it, you know? And was like, all right, I got to at least give Cuban some hash and like we can get out of here and I'll go back to Wisconsin. And, you know, kind of introduce myself and was like, hey, man, it would be an honor if you just looked at my hash, you know? And he kind of, you know, I'm hanging out with, you didn't necessarily say it, but like he's hanging out with all of his friends, you know, and they're having a good time. And like, I'm butting in. So, you know, like, yeah, okay, whatever. So we walk away and he comes and runs me down and grabs me, you know, and he's like, who the fuck are you? You know? And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm Todd. I got this brand Resin Ranch, you know, I go by Dry Sift Jedi, yada yada. And he was just like, bro, do you even know what you just gave me? You know? I'm like, yeah, I gave you some sour D sift. And he's like, no, man, like, bro, you gave me like the best hash I saw all weekend, and I'm judging the hash, you know? So I'm just like, what? You know, like, are you serious? Like, I figured the stuff was good.
Yeah.
Because people are telling me it's good, but I didn't have anything to compare it to, you know? And hey, bro, come hang out, you know, come smoke with us. And those guys just like, that whole table of people opened their arms to me that day, you know, and like smoked with me and talked a little tech with me and was like, to this day, man, it like kind of gives me goosebumps thinking back on it, how cool it was.
For sure.
You know, and he kind of pulled me aside a little bit and was like, I don't even know if he remembers, but he pretty much was like, dude, I could tell you're kind of going through it. Like, I was like, yeah, dude, I made that shit in a fucking hotel room last night. Like, I'm homeless right now, basically, you know? And he was like, dude, like, I've been there, bro. I've made high times entries in hotel rooms. Like, you need to stick with this though, dude. It was like, you're one of maybe 5 people that can make dry sift at this quality. And I was just like, you know, first of all, awestruck that I'm even talking to Cuban Grower, you know?
So sick.
And then he's like telling me that like I'm making this just fucking amazing hash and that if I had entered, I'd have fucking won this weekend, you know? And I'm just
It's like the guiding light in the storm.
yeah,
you know?
dude, no, like for real.
At that moment.
Bro. Like, I broke down in tears when I left. Like, it's kind of choking me up a little bit. Because, dude, I'm serious. I was done. I was like, I'm out of here. I'm going home. Like, I'm not doing this, you know? And that's why him and his wife, dude, to this day, I'm like, you guys don't understand how big of an impact you had on me because of the timing of everything and me being, like, so down in a hole and, like, it was just like, yeah, dude, I went home that weekend like, fuck yes, I'm pumped, I'm charged, like, let's go clean out that hotel room, let's go find an RV, and let's get our asses up to Humboldt, you know? That was it, and that's what we did. And we got our asses up to Humboldt, and she knew a farm, and Steve, old man Steve, he passed away a few years ago, God bless his heart, that guy, you know, kind of brought me under his wing for a few months. And unfortunately, that situation didn't work out because of family issues and some stuff. So I ended up having to bounce. And again, here now I'm like fucking nothing to do, living in an RV, don't have any money. I'm kind of like, I'm getting by still on that trim that we had bought. Actually was storing it in a storage unit in Sac. And I go back and pick up a bag and process it, dude. Like, this is, you know, this is the way it was back then. You know, most people were working with trim, and like this is, I had to grind out a living in Cali, man. And we were like driving the RV.
When's your next break come?
This Bigfoot solventless kid buying rosin off of me. So that's where I was just transitioning into, is we were taking the RV down to San Diego every once in a while to meet up with this dude and sell him some rosin, you know, and he, you know, pick up a few grand at a time. It's like, all right, cool, you know, but I knew I had to be up in Humboldt. So we always kept making our way back up to Humboldt. Like I didn't feel there was any sort of weed scene in LA more than like they got a bunch of dispensaries I want to sell my weed to.
Todd, how were you making your rosin at the time? What was your setup like?
I had a hat press. You remember like the t-shirt presses? They made one with a little bit smaller plates. It was a hat press. Yeah, and we would press on that. Single bagged. We would clean and reuse the screens back then. Like, because you didn't think about, like, I was never really thinking about processing at a level that, like, oh, I should probably just consider this waste, you know, and move on. And it was like this slow process, but, you know, we eked it out for, you know, a while, and it got me enough money that, you know, I could at least get an RV spot out in Fort Bragg. And I was still, you know, I really wanted to do the weed thing and was really trying hard at that, but it wasn't sticking yet, you know, kind of thing. So I was still kind of looking for a construction job, and then Joey Berger lands in my lap. He knew the girl I was hanging out with at the time. They had met somewhere, I don't know, you know, around up in Humboldt. You know, it's weird up there. But and he knew her, and he was trying to get his farm up and going again. He had been busted in 2014, and he hadn't grown up there in a while. And he saw Prop 64 coming down the pipeline, and like he knew, regardless, it's gonna pass this time. Like California's done it, did it, like it was up 2 or 3 times legalization before Prop 64, and it got batted down. And then all these, you know, Colorado now had legalization and all that, so it was like it was inevitable it was gonna pass. And, you know, he knew it, and it's like, all right, I got to get the farm going again, you know. And she was probably the only person available. So he's like, yeah, you guys can come up and work, you know. And we were going to kind of I was only needed like 3 or 4 days a week. So I'd bounce between Fort Bragg and Mendo and go do my couple days a week. And then in Fort Bragg, I would do property maintenance at the RV park I was parked at, you know. And he wanted me more for my construction skills. He had all these grand plans of turning it into like, you know, a cannabis camping destination. We all thought we were going to be able to do all this cool shit under Prop 64, the way they sold it to us. You know, that like we'd be able to do, you know, like a wine tasting thing. Like you'd be able to have that kind of like follow that model kind of thing. So he had me up there more for my construction skill. But there was, say, a little falling out. We're still good friends, but she didn't want to be at the farm anymore. And at this point, I knew where I was. I had watched videos from this farm. I knew who the Humboldt local was. And I was like, I dug my fucking nails in so hard and was like, I'm not leaving this place. I don't care what your deal is. If I need to go sleep in a tent on the other side of the property, I will. If you don't want to see me, whatever, you know, with her. And I'm not leaving because this is my opportunity. Like, this is the spot that I can make all this stuff happen, and I can actually, like, make a living at this. And so she bounced. The farm's mine now. By myself, me and Joey, this big ass farm. We didn't do that much that year. We kept it pretty small because we got in really late. Like, we didn't plant until close to July, I think, which, you know, from there is crazy late. And we just full termed it. And we got russet mites that year. You know, we lost like a third of the crop to russet mites, but we still pulled the crop down.
Nice.
And that's the year that I won first and second at Emerald Cup for dry surf. that first year at the farm.
Wow. With that material.
Yep, with that material. So, obviously we had russet mites, so obviously we had to spray a bunch of shit, and Joey at the time, even back in the day, they did whatever they did back then, Eagle 20, everybody used the shit way back in the 90s, early 2000s. But he was like, I know we could do this easily with some nasty stuff, but we're not going to do that. Like, he was already kind of getting on that, like, I want to be super clean, regenerative type vibe, like he was just starting to go that direction. We were doing organic grow. We weren't growing with salts, but we had to spray like a bunch of pyrethrin and stuff, like Pyganic or I can't remember another brand, but pyrethrin, which at the time everybody used that stuff. And we never even like dawned on us that like it could be dirty, really. Like this was like, that was kind of the year that people were really starting to catch on to the whole pesticides and cannabis being dirty thing. I think it was that 2015 Emerald Cup that I ran into Cuban. I think that was the year that Tim Blake like kind of scolded everybody and was like, everything's tested now, and out of, call it 100 entries, 86 are dirty. Like, like he kind of scolded everybody. So everybody started kind of moving in a different direction. But pyrethrin is from chrysanthemum flowers. It's a natural product. So, it's OMRI listed. Back then, that was all you had to go off. Was the OMRI list, it's OMRI certified or whatever. Most people didn't even know that there was actually a list of approved and unapproved pesticides for California cannabis. Like, most people just didn't even know it back then. I had no idea. I barely even knew what IPM was until we had russet mites that year. We didn't deal with that stuff back in Wisconsin. So never, ever, we had the conversation. I remember it. Okay, the worst that could happen is they test this stuff and we pop dirty, and we end up on the website as we pop dirty. That we're not, we're DQ'd or whatever before the competition. So they run the competition, and we win first and second. It's like, shit, we must have come up clean, like, holy fuck, we pulled this off, dude. We must have come up clean. Never in a million years expecting that they would run that whole competition that year, then finish the testing, then come back to everybody and be like, oh, well, actually you popped dirty. Like, nobody even knew until I got the phone call. I didn't even know. Like, I thought we had tested clean and like everything was good, I get a call from Tim Blake.
How long between you getting the award and that call from Tim?
Like about 10 days, I want to say.
Wow.
It was like 2 days before Christmas, and I was in Wisconsin now, getting back together with my wife. And he calls me, and I'm like, holy shit, Tim Blake is calling me. Like, damn, dude, I must be moving up in the world, And oh yeah, I'm calling with bad news, and gives me the whole spiel. And like, look, dude, I don't want anybody to give you grief for this. I'm not giving you grief for this because I didn't. Even Tim Blake was like, I didn't know you couldn't spray pyrethrin. Like, everybody uses that shit. But he said, I want to use this as an educational point for the industry. Like, this can be a good thing, And I was like, yeah, okay. Me being new to the industry, I thought I had to do everything that Uncle Tim told me, and I got to return my awards, and I got to be DQ'd. Okay, well, I'll whatever. It is what it is. I'll deal with it. I did what I did. We never once were like, no, we didn't do anything or anything. And so we took it on the chin. I gave first place back. That went to Pure Headies and Cult Classic Studios. He said, keep second place, doesn't matter. So I kept the second place trophy. And, we were open and honest about it. And we took it on the chin. And I think that was where I really kind of gained some respect in the industry, because we didn't hide behind anything. You know, when people were popping dirty back then, they'd make all these excuses, and our excuse was like, we did it. What? Like, sorry, you know, we're learning like you're learning, you know. We can proudly say, though, the next year we pulled off 10,000 square feet of canopy with 0 sprays.
That's incredible.
0. And I wouldn't recommend that, so, actually. But that was really a big turning point for me and Joey. I think that we were like, all right, we got to step our game up, you know, and we gotta do this clean, like ultra clean.
Can you talk about a little bit about the dynamic between you and Joey and how it works between you two and you know?
Yeah. So I don't know if he'll see this or he's watching either, but I love Joey. We're great friends. He's one of the best people that I've met in California. Without him, I would not have been able to spread my wings like I did. That guy gave me 10,000 square feet of canopy, and all I had done was go 1,200 watts at a time before that. You know, like that's an insane step up in scale, you know, and had done very little outdoor growing, but I think he saw right away that I had an intuition with the plant, and that I can kind of, when things start going south, I can see it right away, you know, and we can adjust. And I was not scared to ask questions. Any question I had, I immediately would call him and ask, you know, because he's got tons of experience. And so, you know, that first year, it was kind of just like me up there and him still kind of living like the, you know, farm owner grower life, you know, going to a lot of festivals and all that kind of stuff. So I was kind of up there to like learn my way, you know, and that's where I say, you know, growing weed is such a small part of this. I mean, look what's going on behind me with all this construction. You know, you got to be a plumber, electrician, carpenter, you know, a heavy equipment operator on top of it, you know. So luckily I had some construction skills going into it that really helped, you know, being able to manage the property and set up water lines and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, I think he noticed, you know, because he knew more about the industry than me, I think he noticed right away that like, hey, this kid's got something that like, I think could be advantageous for everybody involved, you know. So I was already kind of doing the resin ranch thing, and he would let me pretty much, you know, hey, whatever material you want to run, let's run it, you know. And we would just kind of split it down the middle type thing. And he, you know, really let me, you know, I fucking washed a lot of material that didn't make good hash back then that nobody really ever held me accountable for, you know.
He gave you a long leash.
Yeah, which is huge, you know. And then that next year we really went in with a solid plan, you know. Got a good early start on it. You know, he taught me the whole starting seeds in February under natural light, so that you don't have to, you know, run any sort of supplemental lighting on your full terms, and getting them out in the field under hoops early, you know, and then using that hoop for structure to support the plant. And, you know, he's the one that taught me all that, you know, all that big plant technology, you know, the, you know, beer in bowls around your seedlings, and the slugs will go in there and they die instead of eating your seedlings, you know, bowls under drip lines to catch water to keep the rodents hydrated so they won't chew at your stalks. Just all these cool old school grower tricks. And that second year now I had my wife who's my wife out here, and we're going for it. We're Prop 64 in this bitch. We're gonna get permitted. You know, she's a paperwork genius, so she was doing the paperwork. Me and Joey are doing, you know, the site plans and all this, you know, farm stuff. You know, we got our provisional. We got our, you know, our license from the state. We got our license from Mendo. You know, we were like probably one of the first 50 in the door. And, you know, because he had his bust in 2014, you know, we're going to do everything above board, you know. And that was the year that first year that Palms really bottomed out and went down to like $800-900. That like first time they went to sub 1,000. And, you know, we were trying to do everything above board, not even on track and trace yet, but still trying to do it above board, which now we look back on, I think we both would say we were foolish, not realizing that we could just kind of still do what you did, you know, and just make it look good on the other end on paper. But so that was hard, you know, and I ended up having to leave the farm because we weren't going to hack it financially now because we couldn't sell weed. He was going to, you know, he was looking at maybe having to sell the farm because of all this too, plus a divorce that he was in, you know, and all that. So like we went through kind of a rough patch together too, but we stayed tight. And, you know, like it was a really good working relationship. You know, I was up there on the farm doing the daily stuff, and he was always a phone call away with the big truck that he could come up and bring me whatever, and excavator, and just kind of guide me.
Yeah, I was listening to you talk on the Future Cannabis interview that you did, and how he would bring you up, you know, milk and sugar and different things, and then he just be like, you know, it's KNF stuff, but like not knowing Korean natural farming, I think that would be like quite a trip.
Yeah, dude. So that's where I was going to get into here. Is, you know, but yeah, the dynamic with Joey, is great. I love Joey. I wish that Prop 64 would have treated us better. I think we would have made a hell of a team. You know, we really would have. But yeah, dude. So that year that we're getting permitted too, this guy starts coming up and bringing me, you know, like all these gallons of milk and all this rice and like all this sugar and all this fruit, and like you're gonna let this milk sit out, you know, and like I'm like, what the hell are we doing, you know? And he's like, oh, you gotta go watch some videos on YouTube. Go look up Chris Trump and watch some YouTube videos and watch how to make lactic acid bacteria, the labs, and watch how to make an FPJ and all this stuff. And I'm like, you know, I didn't really want to. I was like, you know, he's like, this is how we're feeding the farm this year, you know? I'm like, okay, I guess. I don't really have a choice. Like, he's my boss, you know, I'm going to follow his lead. And like, God bless him. The guy, I got to say, the guy's got balls, man. He was willing to try things the average person wasn't willing to try. Joey Berger was fucking blowing up cold frame greenhouses, you know, 30 by 40 cold frame greenhouses before anybody in the neighborhood thought you could get away with that, you know, like always pushing the envelope kind of thing. So, you know, we're green as hell in this KNF stuff, but we're going to feed the whole farm this year with it, you know, like, wow, bro, that's okay. That's, you know, that's taking a big risk. That's putting it out there. Oh yeah. And by the way, we're not going to spray anything either. We're going to use these predator bugs, you know, like, okay, wow. After last year, okay. You know, so I always tell them, like, man, I'm so glad you were like the fearless leader that year. Cause like we crushed it and we learned so much. But so I went and watched these KNF videos and it was like, wow, like I can make my own plant food. Like it right away. I was like, wow, this is cool. If this actually works, this is cool. Cause I'm now percentage at the farm. So in my head, I'm constantly like, where can we save money? You know, this is my year. You know, this is my year. Where can we save money? And I can get rich growing weed. Like that was still the mentality. But it was like, dude, we can like, okay, this is cool. So we started doing it and it actually is pretty easy, you know, but I feel like we were still kind of flying pretty blind back then, you know, but it really, I really got into it when we had a row that really started to yellow during stretch. And I was like, all right, I'm going to juice these things with this KNF stuff, you know? And like, this is kind of my experimental patch. And damn, if in like 7 or 8 days, those things weren't fully green again and like banging again. And I was like, okay, I'm visually seeing that this stuff works. Yeah. Like, this actually is feeding, this plant is actually happy getting this, you know, this stinky ass rotten shit. The plant loves it.
Chris Trump is,
you know?
Yeah.
So we went with it. And then we got into, you know, we quickly realized with trying to do the whole farm that like the Master Cho with the whole sugar method,
yeah,
that wasn't going to work. Like, I was going to end up spending all my time doing that, and we were going to spend a fortune on sugar and all that kind of stuff. And we had all these, you know, we had a ton of vegetables that use zucchini, squash, you know, just tons of stuff. So I don't know how he found the Jadam style stuff.
Yeah.
But he came up one day with like, hey, here's Master Cho's son has figured out this method that's kind of easier to scale up. And it was like, okay, now we can make 55 gallons at a time versus a half a gallon at a time. You know, like I could actually make 5,000 gallons at a time if I really wanted to, you know? So it was like, okay, this is a scalable method. Let's try this one, which does require, I think, more feeding if you're going to try and only do KNF. If you're doing Jadam, I think it takes more constant feeding versus like a weekly feeding kind of thing. But it's so easy to produce the ferments versus the Master Cho style, in my opinion, that it just makes so much more sense to me. And it worked. So it's like, damn, this guy's a genius, you know?
Oh man, it's both camps, you know, usually people dip on one side or the other, but I don't think anybody disagrees that both work. So I think that's really cool that, you know, you were able to be exposed to that and opened up and really dial it in, because taking all your cultivation knowledge that you had previously, you know, and then applying it with KNF and Jadam is I think something that you have to be a bit intuitive with plants to be able to do that in the way that you were introduced to it. Like, you didn't go seek out either of these schools of thought. They were forced upon you, and you were still able to, you know, come out with a positive outcome on the first try, which is more than could be said for some.
Yeah, I mean, I'll always say I think there's always a little bit of luck involved with some of this, you know. I always say it. I don't care how good you are. At the end of the day, you gotta have a little bit of luck on your side, you know.
Yeah.
But it was like, and I think my thing that kind of sets me apart a little bit is I'm able to take those little tidbits of information and then take them to my spot and break them down and actually apply them in a method that makes sense for my setup. Because, you know, this is what I tell everybody that comes at me with like pictures of plant problems and this, that, and the other thing. Like, I need to know so much more, you know, like I need to know so much more than just your leaf is yellow, you know, like I need to know root, you know, just so much stuff that, you know, goes into it. So I like to stay open-minded with this stuff and flexible, that, you know, there's no one right way to do it. There's no one right method of doing it. And why can't we mix some of these methods together?
Absolutely.
You know, why can't KNF and Living Soil live side by side? Because they absolutely can, you know? Oh, well, it's anaerobic, and like, yeah, that doesn't matter necessarily.
Yeah.
You get this joint.
I have friends who run hybridized systems, and, you know, when your goal is to create the best outcome in the plant and you're willing to maybe sacrifice some things in the soil and then fix it in the back end, I think that doubling up and hybridizing these systems is you can create some really incredible things.
Yeah, it just brings me to like I've been on this thing lately the last few weeks with like going to that regen camp the other weekend, that Hoogelville that Joey built and all that stuff, which was really impressive. There's tends to be kind of a lot of infighting amongst the different regenerative groups. You got your living soil group that really follows Elaine Ingram or whatever. You got your Master Cho KNF guys like Chris Trump, and then you got your Jadam guys or whatever, and then you've got other methods of regenerative farming. And I don't know why, and I feel like people are, I don't know if pigeonholing themselves is the right term, or putting themselves in a corner, that they don't, for whatever reason, I don't know what the reasoning is, that you can't do that with this, or you can't do this with that, and like, why not?
Yeah.
My KNF recipes aren't killing any biology in the soil. They're actually just adding more diverse biology to the soil. So why is that a bad thing? So I always want to remind people that at the end of the day, remember that all of these systems, a lot of these systems might go on, quote unquote, they're regenerative and they're great. But at the end of the day, a lot of these people are trying to sell you something. They're trying to sell you on a certain product or a certain methodology or a class.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I always try to tell people to just kind of keep in mind that their reasoning may be financial, in that, they do classes and they don't want to start sending half their students over there, which I can understand. But I feel like we all just need to like come to the same table. We're all regenerative farmers. We're all kind of after the same goal.
Couldn't agree more.
And start mixing this stuff together. And and finding like that maybe certain things I'm doing work amazing with certain methods that you're doing, and we can flip-flop, and you can learn from me and I can learn from you, and I can implement your process and with my process, and like we can just have this whole new awesome system.
Yeah.
And nobody gets to tell me how I'm going to do it with my own energy, my own property, my own money, and my own plants.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, nobody gets to dictate that to me.
Yeah. So were you and Joey growing specifically for hash at that point, or was it a mix, or how'd that work?
No, absolutely. Like that first year, it was like whatever we could get, going in that late. A lot of CBD stuff that year, people were still big on CBD. The second year, I don't want to say, I think I'd be lying a little bit if I said we were growing specifically for hash, but there was definitely some stuff we popped that I specifically was thinking of. I'm hoping to make hash out of that, Like I popped a bunch of DNA genetic stuff because they actually, for back then, were pulling pretty good hash numbers, and they, like Tangy and sour Tangy was pretty hot, and and honestly, sour Tangy was like the first hash that I ever smoked that was like, wow, that's got crazy amount of flavor.
Yeah.
Like the terps were just popping, and like, wow, that's orange, like that's unmistakably what it says it is.
Did anything stay in your garden?
What's that?
Did anything stay in your garden that you ran before and after? So you saw the change with the KNF, and you saw the change with everything you got into?
No, I don't. I can't really make that comparison.
Oh, okay.
Because when we were when we were at the hideout, we did everything from seed. So it wouldn't really be fair to make that comparison, period, from one year to the other, even with the same genetics.
So you were doing everything from seed?
Yeah.
Wow.
All the full terms we would do from seed.
That's incredible.
That's wild.
Which, is awesome, but going into the Prop 64 market was a bad idea.
Yeah.
Because that was one of the things that hurt us, was people that were buying wanted batches.
Yeah.
like 30 pound, 50 pound, 100 pound batches. And we had, 10, 5, 7, 15, small amounts of stuff, or, you'd have to batch all the phenos together kind of thing. So that kind of hurt us. But we planted some stuff like all the 24K, which I still have. I still grow. My 24K number 2 came from that run. That's the only thing still surviving from then. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say we specifically did it, but it was in the back of my mind. Absolutely.
One thing I love to talk about is the process of pheno hunting. I think a lot of new people in our industry believe that a pheno hunt takes about 3 months, and I'd love for you to take us through, what a true selection process for you looks like before you're ready to keep something and run it commercially.
I guess 3 months just is impossible, because if you're gonna pheno hunt anything, it's gonna be from seed. So even if you're doing it inside with germination and veg time, I think the quickest that you'd be able to do it is 3 or 4 months, maybe. But
even
still,
at that point, are you
unless
comfortable
you have
running it commercially?
What's that?
Even at that point, once you've run it once, as somebody who's looked through a tremendous amount of material, would you even be comfortable at that point running it commercially, or would you want to see it perform in a different setting a second time, or maybe?
Oh yeah, we'll get to that. Absolutely. But for me, a true pheno hunt, like you gotta look through numbers. Like 10 isn't giving you a pheno hunt. That's barely giving you a representation of the genetics, actually. Unless it's, been like F8 to F8 or higher or something where it's just really stable. You prefer to run a lot. I'm not going to say that you can't pheno hunt with a smaller one, but you have to grow those out. You have to harvest those. If you're just doing it for flour, obviously dry it, trim it, smoke it to see. Check all the numbers. How did it veg? How did it flower? How does it feed? How does it respond to light? You don't want to pick winners that are super finicky. A lot of winners are super finicky, I think, just because we even to this day, I think it's just hard for people to go through large numbers. It's just most people aren't set up for it. Very few people are. So I think if you're going through like 100 of a strain, you're killing it on your pheno hunt. Because most of us, I do it too. I'm popping a 10-pack and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that something really good comes out of there. But you got to grow that out. Then you got to, for my case, hash. I'm looking for the washers. Then I got to wash that, collect that all up, get all those numbers, melt test that, press that, melt test that, to flavor test and all that kind of stuff. Then I need to go back. Okay, I like this one. I'm going to keep this one around, or try to keep this one around. Now I need so we've cloned the seed plant, and now we have the clone of that original seed plant. I now need to run that plant or clone that plant and run another cycle on that to see how that performs, because it's not going to perform like the plant it was cut off of. Yeah, it's an exact genetic copy, but it's not going to perform the same. It's going to have a different root system. It was a clone. It wasn't a seed plant. It might be more susceptible to mold, bugs, all that fun stuff. So you got to grow that out, see how that reacts to all the different parameters you might be looking at. Then wash, dry, smoke, whole thing with that to see how it actually performs before you can say, I'm going to keep this. So in a case like mine, where I do all my pheno hunting outside, I look for new stuff outside. I start that seed this year. We started them I started them in the end of March, I think, this year, because I don't want them super, super, super big. So I started them in the end of March. We're going to harvest those in October and November. Then I need to do all the work of trimming, smoking, harvesting, washing it, all that fun stuff, while keeping all the clones around from all of these this whole time, then grow it out again, both indoor and outdoor, before I can actually make a real decision. Though I guess I could narrow it down by, do I want to grow this indoor or do I want to grow this outdoor? And for me, I guess talking this out verbally, I'm going to probably be looking for stuff that's going to perform indoor, because I'm usually doing the outdoor from seed plants, and the indoor is the tested and true, tried genetics. So I think I would probably just regrow it inside. So yeah, you got to do at least 2 cycles on it before you know what you got. And if it's outdoor like me, it's going to take you the whole year.
Do you run into many issues bringing selected varietals from outdoor selections indoors, or do you find that those to be pretty stable based upon your selections?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think what I've noticed, because I haven't been able to do a lot of say doing seed starts inside and then running that clone outside, but I've done a lot of vice versa. Pretty much in my theory, the way I see it in my experience is that if it does good outside, it's probably going to crush inside. Now, if you're going vice versa, the opposite direction, it might crush inside but not do good outside. If you make all your selections indoor and then bring them out, they might not do as well versus your selections outdoor and bring them in. I think everything that I've brought from outside and selected outside, inside has just done amazing.
So a lot of breeders we're seeing starting to pop up that are specifically selecting and crossing, either line breeding or back crossing or out crossing for hash production. And we're seeing mostly GMO crosses topping out around 8, maybe potentially 9%. Do you feel, in your opinion, that there's room within the cannabis genome or the plant itself to produce higher numbers than that? Or do you feel we're maxing out the plant potential?
That's a good question. That's something I've kind of talked to people with. Yeah, I don't think it could get much higher, man. Once you get if you get up to 10%, you're starting to claim that half the weight of that plant was resin.
Exactly.
It depends on what you use for your fresh frozen ratio. It's usually times 4 or times 5. It kind of depends on the strain. Yeah, man, I hope I'm wrong. And we see something just like boom. I've had some people make some wild claims, like 11 point something on something, and then when I get down to the bottom of it, it was like 7 runs or something like that. So
yeah,
for me, it's got to be no more than 5, and I really want to know what it does in 4.
Interesting.
Because the 5th. If I do a 5th run, I'm not pressing that. That's not going into the rosin grade.
Yeah,
that's gonna either get probably nowadays Temple Ball. I've been really into kind of the spliff hash.
Yeah,
because I'm a smoker, as you guys see sitting here talking to me.
So let me ask you this, Todd. Other than examining the actual glands of laden flower, and of course washing the material, have you been able to identify any characteristics in late veg or early flower that tell you that plant is going to mechanically separate well in ice water?
Another good question. I have not really put any thought into that. Now I have a new parameter that I'm going to start looking at in my grows. Thank you.
No worries, bro. No worries. I want to ask you about growing for hash. We've talked a lot about your journey, and you clearly have a very wide spanning, amassed an extreme amount of experience in different cultivation methodologies. And I wanted to ask what today you would do differently in your methodologies growing for resin versus flower.
today,
Or is there a difference? If there's no difference, that
it's
that
that was a good question, and that's one of the things I was going to say is that, even 5-6 years ago, I think if you put a little more attention into the grow, you ended up with a little bit better hash, like proper dry downs, really hard dry downs towards the end. You can kind of maybe get her to push a little more resin, stress her out just a little bit. Was something that I really got into. And in different light spectrums, before LEDs were hot and stuff, we were still growing under HPSs, but I was always trying to add different spectrums to the mix, which I don't think I was adding enough for it to really make a difference back then. But nowadays, I don't think there's much of a difference with the technology and lighting that we have now and the genetics that we have to work with, because like you say, there's so many people breeding just for hash, and that kind of has only come about in the last maybe 4 or 5 years. If you were breeding just for hash 5 years ago, like you were ahead of the curve, and amen.
Sure.
So I tell people all the time that, like, a lot of credit goes to the genetics these days.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
Like, I've had conversations with other hash makers, like, what is it that, because the quality of hash really increased, like, dramatically between, like, I'd even say 2016 and 2017, that first ego clash. And I don't think it was because of that necessarily. I just think that was really all these things kind of came together at the same time. First ego clash, people breeding for hash, that it just, like, now it's so much easier. It really is.
How much percentage wise do you think genetics play in full melt versus cultivation and cultivator?
Yeah, I mean, probably not over 90%.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Like probably way over 90%. I tell people one of the sayings I have is, I can teach a monkey to wash, but I can't teach a monkey to grow, and I can't teach a monkey what good genetics are. And I don't necessarily mean I can teach a monkey to wash, but washing's pretty easy, and it's step A, B, C, D. But growing, there's so much more intuition involved, and people talk about pheno hunts and making selections. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I'm going to say that very few people have the knowledge, experience, or capability to make good selections.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that, man.
And I'll even put myself in that group for the most part.
Before we jump, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So before we jump into the hash part, one last question I wanted to ask you, as someone with experience running both indoor, outdoor, and seeing a lot of material, are you able to notice any consistent differences in the resin between salt grown and organically fed cannabis?
Usually in a wax cuticle, the salt grown usually has more of a waxy membrane. You end up with more of at least that's just my experience, and I don't have a ton of experience with salts, or even washing material ran with salts.
What about indoor versus sun grown?
Now, yeah, there's definitely some huge differences, even like organically. The indoor always is going to be cleaner. Like, that's kind of a given, I think. And it always has that really light blonde look. Compared to the outdoor, you get a lot more color variations that comes out, I think, from resin to resin. And to me, I feel like the color of the resin almost matches the flavor. Like, a lot of the citrus strains, the resin is kind of more orange tinted. Like the papaya strains, it's like almost towards a greenish tint. Like, if you really look at it, it almost has like a green tint to it. It's in, like, peach is kind of peach. Like, it's, to me, that's like one thing that I notice is with the outdoor. And the indoor, it's kind of like just this white. really white, light colored, super ultra clean, you know. Definitely more of a flavor profile on the outdoor.
Interesting. Okay, well, I know from
I think.
hey man, this is an interview, everybody's entitled to their opinion, and that's
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
what we're interested in.
I do both side by side. I do a lot of the same stuff in and out, and feedback from customers and friends is kind of like, if you really 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 know what you're looking at, you might be able to tell that it's the outdoor because it might be a little bit darker,
Yeah,
or have a little, I'll just say, more color to it when it comes to the rosin, and the indoors lighter. But other than that, usually, man, if you did a side by side, I bet you most of the people are going to come back and say that they couldn't tell the difference, or they'll probably point at the outdoor. So, it's like,
I'm with you there. I truly, I know the power of outdoor 100%.
it's king. The sun is, we can't do it better than Mother Nature. No way.
Yeah.
And if people just would get off of the whole, everything's so visual these days, which, does add to your experience, but only so much.
Yeah.
That I just, dark hash used to matter. Like when hash really started blowing up, people didn't care that much if it was dark. If it was fire, it was fire, And now it's like, I think some things get overlooked because they might not look as good as the next thing in a jar. And that's
100%, man. 100%.
I feel people are coming around, and it ebbs and flows as the consumer becomes more educated.
Yeah.
They start to realize those things.
Absolutely, man. I know from listening to some past interviews that you do a mix of both hand and machine paddle, or I guess machine wash and hand paddle. Can you walk us through what your current wash setup is like?
Yeah, so I do everything in 32 gallon brutes still. I think I kind of the theory that, like, as long as you're using clean cans, clean utensils, all that, everything doesn't need to be stainless. I think maybe in the the legal side, maybe for cleanliness of labs and all the stuff they deal with, but like if you're just a really clean person, I don't think it's all super necessary. But I'm super basic, man. 32 gallon can, 250 micron wash bag from Rosin Evolution, and we paddle that first wash for 6 minutes. We'll call that the quote unquote melt pull, if we're going to pull melt, and we don't know until we run the strain and check the bags on the first pull, especially from the outdoor. The indoor, usually it's going to be there. It's going to be clean enough as long as the resin's good and melty. And then the second run, we do drill and paddle. Have always done drill and paddle from day one. A big concrete mixer bit. It's like 8 inches wide. So it's not like having to spin super fast. And as long as you don't overload things, you just get that mass moving, and you can move it real slow. No different than the slowest setting on a machine. You can get rough with it if you want. You just go gentle at it, and we do that, and we'll do 4 washes. So the first run, the hand washes for the melt, and then we try to minimize labor by using the drill for second, third, and fourth. But other than that, that's the only mechanical thing I use. I don't use actual wash machines.
You have different bag sets when you're working with indoor material versus outdoor material?
Not necessarily, but kind of, just because the way that the stuff kind of cycles through the lab, we kind of work through all the outdoor, at least because it's my first year here is probably the only reason it worked out that way. But we kind of worked through all the outdoor and then moved into all the indoor stuff that I had kind of stockpiled. So I bought a new set, but yeah, that's definitely something I'm probably going to implement, and I've thought about, because the indoor is, you know, super clean and there's not a ton of it, so the bag set will stay good for a long, long time. With the outdoor, you know, we run through so much more quantity and it's not quite as clean, so I think the bags get used up a little bit quicker. Though if, you know, you maintain them,
Yeah.
they last pretty damn long, you know, as long as you keep the screens clean, and it's all up to the hash maker to not be sloppy, and, you know, there's a
100%.
lot of it.
100%. Are you running any double bags? Like, what's your bag set? Just a standard bag set? And what kind of bags are you running?
Yeah, so I do. I run the ice extracts. I do. I like to run a 20-gallon set because most of my washes are like 4K at a time or up. Usually between like 4 and 10. You know, we'll use 2 cans for that. But yeah, that first run, we'll use the whole set. We'll do 40, 70, 90. A lot of times with the outdoor, I'll run the 104 and the 120. But just on that first pull, and until I know a strain, when I know a strain, I won't necessarily put the 120 in there. And my reasoning for throwing the 104 in there is if you run a 104, you get way less 90, but it's super clean. Like, even the outdoor can come out like super, super clean if you run the 104 bag. Like, I never ran it until this year.
I know guys
But
doubling
yeah,
up
we'll
on
run
multi
the.
bags and then only running single money bags.
Yeah, I've heard of Shiner's Run Farm or something like that. Years ago at Emerald Cup, I met him, and he was running double 150, and saying that the 120 gets a lot cleaner and stuff like that. And like, yeah, he said you'd be surprised what you catch in the second bag. And I've never ran a double bag. I'll be totally honest. It's always something I wanted to try. It just, I don't know. Sometimes they just get caught up in the like, oh, we got to get this done, and there's other stuff to do, you know?
Yeah. So where do you fall in the fresh press versus cured rosin debate? Do you have a preference one over the other, or any opinions on the matter?
Absolutely. I got opinions for days, bro.
Let's go.
You know me. Fresh press all day.
Okay.
All day. There's a few strains that I might prefer the cold cure, but I don't think I've ran into them yet. For me, man, every time I do it side by side, the fresh press next to the cold cure, the fresh press has more flavor for me. It's, once you cold cure it and you whip it, it's always off-gassing terps. That's why it smells so loud. It's losing terps. Where the fresh press sometimes has literally zero nose, because it's all encapsulated still in oil. It's caught in the terpenes are caught in the oil. They can't escape. So once you start whipping it, curing it like that, you're changing the terpene profile. And I think testing would prove that, and probably proves that. You know, I've seen some people do only show basically like the terpene percentage in the end, not what terpenes are present, but that the cold cure has higher terpene content than the fresh press. But I haven't seen anybody put what terpenes are present in the fresh press and what terpenes are present in the cold cure, because I bet they're different. Something changed. Sure. Like Frenchie used to preach all the time, pressing hash changes the terpene profile and actually creates that, you know, hashinoline or whatever it is terp that he used to talk about. So I think that if you did the testing, you'd probably see that it changes a little bit, and that's why it's higher. It doesn't necessarily mean it's better to have more terpene content, I guess is what I'm getting at. I don't think that necessarily makes something more flavorful or tastes better just because it has more.
I think that's a
so yeah, I definitely would prefer to do fresh press, but the market says otherwise.
Interesting. I see Cali really leaning towards fresh press personally. Do you see?
I think it's coming back around. I'm feeling it. I've been preaching it all year that like fresh press is going to come back around again with the the education of the consumer, and they start to just. My thing that I always tell people is like you got to have a little bit of brand trust. If you don't have any brand trust, then maybe the brands you're smoking on, maybe you should look at it's a different brand. Because
do you consider the visual inspection of the fresh press a marker of quality for you, the same way you would look at the ash on the end of a joint?
I like the visual, like after it's already like on the nail,
yeah, like,
burnt on the.
No. Like the fresh press in the jar presented to you. Are you looking at that to analyze quality and clarity and associating clarity of fresh press with quality, or do you believe that that's a false judgment? Is really
I think that's a false judgment because depending on the temperature that you press at,
100%.
you can either end up with tiny little air bubbles that won't make it as clear, or you can press it at a lower temperature and get that like super clear patty that has no air bubbles. And it might just not be super clear because it's just starting to nucleate and turn. It's curing a little bit in
100%.
there, possibly. So I would say not necessarily. There's again visual. The visual experience is part of the whole experience for sure. But I think
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that it's not necessarily a reflection of the quality.
What are your thoughts on cured material versus live material? In your experience, have you found varietals that are better cured or partially dried or fully dried as opposed to that same varietal fresh frozen?
Yeah, I'm really glad. I'm glad you're asking that. I'm glad that the community is having this conversation because the driving the fresh frozen mark the whole thing like fresh frozen. Yeah, it's great, man, it's great, but I think we could be missing some stuff, and I've only recently I've kind of been like I've done a lot of dry work back in the day. It's been years, every once in a while I'll wash some dry trim for a friend of mine, and it's not the funnest experience for me because it's trim, probably. But I definitely, then I went up to Kush Kirk's recently and he handed me a jar of some from cured material. I would say freshly dried material is more than cured, and wow, it was I've seen some cured stuff, that is like, okay, yeah, it's pretty good, but not that like, wow, this like has the same color as the fresh frozen. It's got all the terps, maybe a little bit different than the fresh frozen, but like it was super loud. It was really wet. I mean, it was really good. And I kind of almost think that there's no argument that there's a little more punch behind the cured stuff,
What's the time do you feel between the cured or like the freshly dried and it being like an actual like cure?
Yeah, so I was gonna kind of work into that. I don't, that's why I say I'm glad that the community's having this conversation, because I think more of us need to start looking at some strains that we might overlook because they don't wash well fresh, and start either doing a partial dry on them or, like a 7-day dry and washing them. Because I think we're missing stuff, and I think we're missing some flavors, and I think it can be a really good product if treated done properly. And it is more work. At the end of the day, it is more work. Like, you have to have dry space now. You have to have, now you got to like be super careful with that when you're bucking it down and de-leafing it, like, and then what level of processing do you do? Can you maybe process it wet like we do and then dry it? I feel like there's a lot more experimentation that needs to be done. Solventless Mind, he's out there preaching the cured material thing. I think he's onto something. I don't think he's necessarily brings the point across the best with some people. But I also think that some people are just really sensitive to the what's the word I'm looking, the more volatile terpenes that you'll have in the fresh frozen versus the cured material. So I think there's a place for all of it. I want to see more cured material come around, is what I'm saying. I want to start messing with it more. It's just going to take a lot more infrastructure and investment on my part to be able to do it. And I've always because I used to be the guy that was like, fresh frozen sucks. And it was only because I had never worked with a good fresh frozen strain. And I was getting this green, horrible stuff, and then I worked with a good fresh frozen strain and was like, I'm never washing dry again, So it's been years. So I want to see it come back around, man. I really do. I want to see more people exploring this, because the other thing, like with the breeding that I wanted to touch on a little bit too, with the hash breeding, I feel like in the hash community, we're really starting to end up going down a genetic pigeonhole of everything having strawberry, banana, papaya, and GMO in it. So everything is kind of just a different version of the same 3 or 4 fruity flavors with maybe some GMO thrown in there. Which is why I'm like totally on this, trying to find more. Like, I want to find an old Romulan cut, and wash that. And I'll bet you, you're kind of like, I said the same thing until I dabbed it and was like, damn, that shit's fire. Like the Sour D.
The breeder of Romulan is up in this area, the original.
It like the Sour D, like what Sour D just disappeared for years, and then some people start bringing it back, and like I did some this year, and everybody that got it was just like, dude, what were we thinking not growing this?
Yeah,
like,
I think the D's
it's
coming back.
So good.
Yeah.
Like find those old OG cuts that might wash because nobody was really washing back then, or they didn't get looked at because they don't wash fresh. Maybe they wash dry. I don't know. I honestly don't have the experience with it to say. I just don't want to see us all of a sudden. Yeah, just with the same, everybody with the same 4 flavors.
No, I think I like your perspective, man. Unfortunately, I agree with it. I think we're heading towards a pigeonhole, and I also think we are over. A thought I've had that we're overlooking stuff that potentially would wash dried and cured. And I know that there are some makers who are almost have gotten to the point where they have no interest in touching anything that's not fresh frozen. And I think that that idea might have to change. Have you ever played with any partial dry, like 3 or 5 day dry, and then
I haven't, but I recently listened to Rackham's hashish, and he was talking about it, and like, that's why I'm glad you're asking and we're having these conversations. It's something I so want to do, I just, it might be a while, and because it's just hard with me to now add a whole nother, basically another job on my plate that's already super full of now having to dry the stuff to a certain point and then deal with it, where we can just tear a room down and get it in a freezer and I can go back to work on other stuff, So Absolutely. It's really kind of like life getting in the way, which is another thing about fresh frozen I've always said, is it really became more of a logistical thing that, like, you could wash it fresh in the field without freezing it, but we freeze it for storage, transportation, all that kind of stuff. That's really why we freeze it.
Yeah. What kind of indications are you looking at for when you're taking your material down?
Yeah, I kind of I do scope it, but I don't just go off of what I see in the scope. I really wait for that when the hairs start to recede and the calyxes start to swell. I really want to wait. Now, some strains you can't go that long with them, and some strains just always are going to have those white hairs. But I really want to see that the red hairs dying back, receding. And now this is where I talk about harvest time and when to take it. I just took this last room 70. We started harvesting at day 74. We took most of the stuff, the last thing down, we took to day 78. Like, that's going deep for hash.
For sure.
And most people would be pulling, I think, these strains at 60 days, but I'm finding out now washing them that it's coming out amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not darker or anything like that. And I used to, say that because people think you harvest early for fresh frozen.
Yeah.
I think that's misconstrued. We don't, or at least for me, I don't harvest early. I just harvest earlier than I would if I was going to dry it, if that makes sense. So I'm not pulling the flower premature, but if I'm going to dry it, I'm going to wait for it to fully recede into those calyx and them swell, not just brown and start pulling back, and really let it blow out.
There, Todd? What's your thinking on that? What's your thinking?
I don't want things premature sucks, so I want it to go as deep as it can, but not degrade.
Yeah.
Is where I'm at now. Like 60 days, screw that, man. We used to cut some of these strains at 60 days, taking them deep, 78, and like the whole trichome color thing. That's why I say I do look, because the other thing I look at is the trichome structure. If you just keep watching them and watching them and watching them, they'll, you look at a plant at day 50 and it looks frosted out, and the heads look nice and big and everything, but wait another 20 days and you're going to have more bigger heads. Those big heads will be bigger usually. And I feel like the stalks might start to shrink a little.
Absolutely.
So you might reach that, that weak neck that Schwale or Schwally or whatever talks about. I think your ratio of that, how hard it holds on, changes a little bit.
100%.
So, what's that?
In terms of ripeness, do you find that it's now a riper fruit and the flavor is completely different with that extra 2 weeks to 3 weeks?
Yeah, with certain strains, absolutely. And I think with all strains, yeah. But certain strains, you really notice it, like the Dosi papaya we just harvested. We've taken that pretty deep, but we've also harvested it like day 65, and then we just harvested it at day 78. And it definitely, the amount of papaya that comes through really changes the deeper you let it go. It becomes more papaya and less Dosi, where if you harvested it earlier, it's more Dosi and less papaya. So, and like, it's quite a noticeable difference to me. And I feel like the strawberry guava, another one we did, taking that one deep, it gets more of a you say the right fruit, dude. You're so on, because it's almost, because strawberry guava is so fruity, it's almost like the fruit's just, like not rotting yet, but where it's like it's getting pretty soft, so it like gives it this extra funk that it's never had when I've washed it before, and I like it.
That's awesome.
Are you pressing your milk, or are you collecting your milk?
That's one. Okay, so that's one reason that I made this whole move over here and bought this whole property and everything, was so that I could have like not just that one harvest a year or the two, you know, the dep and then the full term, and then work that all winter and only made, you know, then the melt was like every year it was a toss up. Are we even going to be able to have stuff clean enough to pull melt this year? Depending on where the fires might be in relation to you, or how windy it was that summer, or whatever, you know, a myriad of reasons. So I wanted to have a small indoor that I could continuously be producing clean full melt to put out, because I love rosin, don't get me wrong, like absolutely, it's amazing, like the stuff is great, but I'm a melt head. I would choose melt first, so I always wanted to be able to keep producing melt. And I was getting to a point with all these fires and the way some of these summers are getting that it's like some years I wouldn't have any. So it was like, I don't have the product that I want, you know?
What is it about melt that you love so much? And what do you think that changes between melt and when it's pressed through the press and out of the bag?
Again, the taste changes a little. You know, because you're now adding heat, so you lose a little bit of the more lighter monoterpenes and stuff. And for me, it's like, it's that whole experience of like pressing out a flag, like, because that was back in the day, man, that the satisfaction back in the day when like hash was starting to become good, of pressing out a flag and it being super clear, and like the cut was just like, there was a whole experience just in that, and like, wow, that's so cool, look at that, that's cannabis, you know, that's what the resin looks like. So there's still that, you know, making the flag, and like for me the effect is a little bit better, it's more long lasting.
Yeah.
Than that kind of, and maybe that's you know, another topic with the fresh frozen versus cured thing. I think the, you know, fresh frozen is kind of a quick punch.
Absolutely.
Where the cured might last a little longer. So for me, that, you know, the hash lasts a little longer. For me and my body, it's what I prefer. I'm a smoker too, so I'll be honest that I'm a smoker, and taking a bunch of fresh frozen rosin dabs, you know, like I feel it more than I do the water hash.
Yeah.
It's just, for me, it's a smoother, less vapory terp hit, you know?
Yeah. What are your thoughts on air drying versus freeze drying? Do you feel as though a perfectly executed air dry is better than a perfectly executed freeze dry, or vice versa?
I think it's pretty kind of strain dependent. Some strains do great air dried, others don't. Like GMO, again, not the best air dry because it's got quite the waxy membrane. So freeze drying it tends to, it does, I don't know exactly what, but it seems like when you have a more waxy cuticle, freeze drying it, it's a better product than air drying it. Where something thin, you know, like an OGKB or Starburst OG or something, you know, probably would be pretty equal air dried to freeze dried. Though, you know, I did some freeze dried runs this year after years of only running the freeze dryer, and like they were amazing. They were great. I love them. I think it looks cooler. For me, it looks cooler because I remember what the hash used to look like, and like the fish egg looking thing, and like I like that. But now I'm like having more conversations with people, and I feel like in being a dry sifter from the beginning, you know, back in the day, and that's where I started, I feel like the freeze dryer is actually a better representation of the resin because it hasn't been manipulated in any way, because microplaning or sieving, you're either smashing stuff or grinding stuff or, you know, whatever it may be, where the freeze dryer, you just get that untouched, still round, unadulterated head, you know, where in the freeze dry or the air dry, is, you know, breaking that head open. Is that good? Is that bad? Can you be losing some terpenes from that? And again, I think it could be very strain dependent. Some doing better one way than the other. But I used to say air dry all day, but now I'm starting to say that freeze dry I think is a better representation.
What made that change?
Sorry?
Like what encouraged that change in your head and in your palate? Was there like a key factor? Was there a key strain and experience?
Yeah, it was,
what triggered that?
Having lunch with my friend Joseph Sullivan Moore, who's just a hash head. Like, he supported me from day one. He's friends with all the hash makers. He's like the only non-hash maker grower that I think is he's the guy I give stuff to be like, does this pass? Like, is this really fire? Like, you don't want to give him the A- stuff. He's got to have all the A+ stuff all the time. But we were just having lunch one day and having a conversation about it. And, then I started thinking about it more. And like, that used to be my whole thing about dry sift, was that like, it's the only method that it's like completely unadulterated. That's the way it was on the plant. That's the way you're consuming it, versus even water hash. You're putting it through water and all this stuff. And, something's going to change a little bit. So the more I think about it, I'm like, that's just having that pure head untouched, or still intact, I should say, I think is, that's the way it is on the plant. It's, it's still whole and round and not shredded up or smashed down or anything like that.
Have you ever made hash from freeze-dried cannabis?
No. That's I've always wanted to kind of see what would happen with that. I think the freeze-dried weed is kind of weird. If you've ever smoked it, there's definitely like,
I do.
I've
worked with it myself.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's different dry, like you can definitely get it way too dry?
Yes.
Like
100%. When we first started getting it, it was way too dry, and then it's taken some parameter optimization, and then there's a kind of an optimal level of moisture content to have in it.
Yes.
So it's just moisture. That's a whole other thing. But I don't know. There's something there. I just don't think we've uncovered it yet, or maybe some have and they're just not sharing.
I wanted to dry sift freeze-dried weed.
Really opens the door for that.
I haven't done it myself, but when I was over there with Wally and sharing a lab with him, he was messing around with it a bunch, and just like the GMO, man, just dropped it on the plate, and it was like, I've never seen that much resin come off a bud in my life, So, no, give me 1 second, guys. Yeah, what's up? Oh yeah, let's go look at a trench quick.
Yo, let's go check it out.
Hey.
That's looking like it.
I've got like,
it
the
looks
remnants
pretty good
of
to
the
me.
chalk. They're like, they seem like they're here and up there.
Yeah,
I can't really tell. Not sure if you had measured an exact distance for it.
This is the first time on the show we've ever been like live and direct. Like,
Hey, we're on the show?
oh, we're on
Yeah.
the show.
All
There's the man building the Hoogles.
Cool.
Sam.
Okay, what up, boys?
What up, boys?
Yeah,
Welcome to the
it's
show.
They don't have to be exact, And where's, who's to say this isn't the straight line over here,
Well, the next step is to dig the trench.
Cool.
And that will depend, so if we want the trench to
yeah.
come at an angle and where you want the water to end
We'd
up.
just love to just come straight out,
Yeah. The other thing to consider too, if we go further, then you get a little bit bigger bed. So just wanted to make sure before I trench that.
I would say maybe go another 8-10 inches.
Okay.
And then I think it looks like it'll be a little more in line.
Okay.
And then we can just have a straight trench out.
Cool. So there's no problem with it going a little bit further this way.
Yeah.
Great.
I'd
Okay.
say let's just go like another 8
Rock
inches.
and roll.
Cool, man. Thanks.
So Todd,
the show.
this is actually a great time to ask our friends, our good friends Adam and Hannah at Mission Hill Melts. They are actually in the process of putting in some beds, some Hugel beds, and they're big fans of yours. And they wanted to ask me to ask you if you're doing anything differently now that you're looking at the clay that you're digging into, as far as how you're putting your beds together.
It's a good question, because that's why I have Samuel here helping me. He his specialty is doing fire clearing and then putting that material to use, because now you have all this downed wood and everything. So this is pretty much what he does, is build Hugels out here. So he's got the technique down, and they know, he knows that the soil is really got a lot of clay. So, there's kind of two methods. There's the trench method, or you can do just above ground mounds, where you just pile the wood up on the ground and you make a mound. Where if you're in like a really wet area, I would say you would not want to trench deep like we are. If anything, you would only want to take a little bit, but you would mostly want to be above ground. And then since it's got so much clay, we made sure, and Samuel knows from experience, that these could, if we get a ton of rain, basically turn into a swimming pool. It's just going to fill up with water, and because it's clay, it won't soak out. So we pitch them both in one direction, and then that's the trench we were just talking about. And then you dig a skinny, just a small, like 1 foot wide trench out from the two. So they're basically both like big French drains. And even backfilling it, because we cut through that clay and it's a hard surface still, even backfilling it, any water is still going to migrate downhill to where the drain will put a bunch of stone in the bottom, so that any water that does get to the drain can easily run out, and it'll just run out down the hill across the path and probably get caught by another possibly raised Hugel mound. So it's all about, one of the big things about these is doing them on contour and trapping the water.
Contouring, yeah.
Surface water and sinking it,
Yeah.
So yeah, we definitely, these need an option to drain so that we don't ever run into any sort of issue with overwatering or rain and then getting root rot type of thing. But with the depth of them and having almost 2 feet of wood on the bottom, should be deep enough of a sink that the roots won't even really get down to that bottom layer where the water would be anyhow. Most cannabis roots are going to stay most of them in the top 2 feet,
100%.
probably. So that's the other thing, is he's got a lot of experience of doing cannabis in these beds. So we do, instead of using all native soil, because the cannabis is so picky, we do bring in the top 2 feet will be brought in soil.
Mm-hmm.
Because the cannabis is so picky, it'll definitely eventually get its feet down there, but we kind of, and plus because we want to use them the first year, we kind of have to have a good layer of soil that's really easy for it to grow in,
Yeah, absolutely. Todd, I wanted to ask you about resin blending or mixing. Is that something that you're a fan of? Is it something that you've done in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not a problem at all. I actually went into Ego Clash this year kind of saying I bet a mix wins, because I think it's really kind of the only way you're going to get something so unique at this point, that to really stand out is going to be a mix. And look, both winners were a mix. So I'm totally down with it. We've done one of my biggest hits has been the Chem Dog by Dosi Papaya mix that we did, mixed wash we did. So I'm all about it. I mean, I got no problem with it. We used to do salad bowls back in the day. You know, it's not much different than that, right?
100%, man. Something that we like to discuss with every maker we bring on the show is yields and how we're calculating yields and how we're communicating with each other. And I just wanted to know for you, what are the important metrics for you? Are you measuring yield off the press? Do you think that's an important metric to look at? Do you think the best way to look at things is resin per square foot? What are your thoughts overall?
Yeah, I think both of those. Because I want to produce melt, and some of my stuff isn't getting pressed, I'm more interested in what the actual wash numbers are versus the final rosin number, I guess. And just from like, you know, doing so many batches, I mean, it's like I almost don't even need to know what the rosin percent is. I know you're going to lose 1% to the press pretty much, you know, but yeah, so I'm more interested in the actual hash number versus the rosin percentage, though it on a lot of stuff I will also figure out what the rosin percentage was, mostly just out of curiosity.
Yeah,
you know, because there are definitely some things that'll dump and then you'll go to press them and you're like, wow, this really didn't, like, there's a lot more left in the bag than I thought there was going to be. This looked pretty good, you know?
Yeah, for
so
sure.
Some definitely don't juice as good as others, but it's feel like across the board, it's pretty close to a 1% loss from the hash number to the rosin number. And then, yeah, what was the other one? Resin per square foot. Yeah.
Yeah. Resin per square foot.
Yeah. As you know, as hash makers, like I don't dry my room, so I don't want to know how many pounds I have of light. Though I kind of do, because, you know, from back in the day, it was like you were always pushing for that 1 pound of light point, you know, and now we're like blown past that, but still you're like, oh yeah, I did two and a half of light, you know? But really, yeah, it's all about resin per square foot, because then in choosing your strains, that's where you can really get into what is going to be financially the biggest bang for your buck to run, you know, and like what makes sense and what doesn't make sense.
Do you feel water activity in the plant can skew hash yield numbers? For example, if somebody were to grow over idle in Rockwell and do a 3-day dry back and harvest that plant, weigh that material, and then get the yield versus somebody, say, cultivating in an outdoor hucal bed that stayed very moist through harvest, do you think that that's going to affect the yield number, or do you think that that's minimal as far as a variable?
Yeah, good question. I think I totally lost my train of thought. Well, wait, ask me the question again in the short version.
So do you think that there's a viable difference between
the return from the water movement and return? I think it's pretty negligible at the scale most of us are working with. I think if you extrapolated it out over like these gigantic 80-100 acre grows that people are doing now, I think you're going to see that there may be a difference, you know, like it actually might financially be quite different. Yeah. But, you know, on like say 9 or 10 lights, I think it's you're probably not even going to notice it.
Yeah. So as being somebody who hybridizes between hand washing and machine washing, what is your thoughts on commercial scale solventless machines? Do you feel as though there's a feeling that these machines will never be able to surpass that only hand washing will be able to produce a certain quality? Or do you feel that, you know, it's just a matter of time before we're producing that melt level quality out of an automated machine?
Yeah, no, I mean, I've kind of always like said that I have no problems. Like, I'm not anti-machine because I don't run one. It's just the drill, you know. And
True.
The only reason I don't is it's personal decisions of I hate cleaning those things.
Yeah.
And most of them, the work surface is high, and I got kind of bad shoulders from construction over the years. So working up here all day doesn't really work for me. Yeah. Working down where the can is works really good for me. And with, being as smooth at it as I am at this point, I mean, two of us could pretty much do the same amount as the machine, but in a labs, like a legal lab setting, a machine I think is crucial because a guy can set it and forget it and go do other tasks, and I absolutely think that used properly, like I've seen the Osprey run in person, used properly, I think that they can produce just as clean as a hand paddle, really.
You talk about in other interviews not being a fan of the 220 work cubes. Can you talk a little bit about why that is and what your theory is behind that?
I just don't like, I feel like confining your material in any way into a bag like that is just going to work against you. It's you're confining stuff. We're using screens separated. I mean, the weed in a way acts as another screen. So having it all packed together, I feel like some resin might be just getting trapped in the material. And it's just, for me personally, washing with them, I didn't like it, it didn't groove with my style. So I like to do, just the big 32-gallon work bag, or even bare naked, because you can do a little bit bigger wash and still get the same quality and, fit a little more in the same size can.
Yeah.
It's a little more work, pulling a 32-gallon bag that has 4,000 or 5,000 grams of wet material plus the ices, and it isn't exactly super light. Like if you tried to outwash the machine, you're going to be tired at the end of the day. But that's why I really like these new 250 micron bags from Rosin Evolution, because you pull them out of the water and the water's just already out of it. We're like the flat bottom work bags.
Yeah.
You just, it's acting like a funnel kind of, and like you can't even do GMO in a flat bottom work bag. It's just going to clog it with resin. Where the 250, you can definitely rock it with the like, they got like 4-inch sidewalls on them too, which definitely helps big time.
Can you talk to us a little bit about Cuban Grower and the impact he's had and the influence he's had on you as a maker?
Yeah, I mean, he's the GOAT. And like I said earlier, with that whole story, I don't think I would have gone down this road if it wasn't for those words of encouragement from him.
Yeah.
And also just having somebody, because it's pretty rare in this industry to like have somebody like be at all like personable with you like that. Like, hey, I know it's tough right now, but like I've been there, stick it out kind of thing. And like, you should be doing this because you're good.
Yeah.
That was it. And then he's always, him and his wife have always been super cool with me and nice, and inviting me places and come hang out at the booth at High Times, back in the day when the High Times events were still going on, and which I thought was cool because they didn't know me, Yeah.
There's been a lot of recent talk around hand separation, or dry sifting and separating using your hand, or using your hand with a nitrile glove on it. Is that something that you have any familiarity with?
Oh yeah, been on it for years.
Can you talk a little bit about that and what that entails?
Yeah. It's actually kind of interesting. So I've always done like the static tech, and I'll usually do like so I never really, I don't know why, but I'll admit it, I never got good with the paint roller. I don't know if I'm using the wrong paint roller or what, but I've never had good luck with the paint roller, so I always used the DVD, which was super tedious because like you're collecting a fraction of what, like, who's the Jungle Boys, their hash maker guy that does the dry sift and pressing.
His name's
Yeah, Greg. You know, like he gets some huge pulls with that paint roller. You know, like I never got pulls like that, so I always used the DVD, and I'd get pretty decent ones, but pretty laborious. And I had a guy randomly hit me up on IG, an older guy from Humboldt. And this was, I think this was back in like 2017 or so when I was doing this, for that second Emerald Cup, the entries I was making. And he said, bro, try a nitrile glove. Just blow it up a little bit like a balloon and try that. And I tried that, and like, holy shit. It collected so much on that first pass, and it was actually a cleaner separation. Like it pulled less, because you're doing the static. You're always going to pull some contaminant with the heads. There's just, you know, some are going to be stuck together. You're always going to pull some, and it seemed like the separation was cleaner on the nitrile glove. And then, so I've been doing that for a while, the nitrile glove when I do sift. And then I see this whole hand tech thing coming up recently, and I just, like last week, had another guy from Humboldt, younger guy out in Honeydew, start sending me a bunch of fire, like dry sift pictures. It's this random kid with like 100 followers, you know, and like these fatty glove pulls and stuff. And like, damn, turns out he knows the dude that told me. And from what I could glean from the conversation was that guy probably knew Skunkman Sam, and that was Sam's tech, was the nitrile glove. And like, that's cool, you know. And we just kind of got to talking, and like, apparently if it's the same guy, he's recently passed away. But like, I thought it was so cool that this random dude, you know, I was like, damn, bro, like, you should be out here, you know. He's like, no, I don't want anybody to know who I am, you know, like old school Humboldt style.
Yeah.
But making fire dry sift, you know. Now there's this other kid, and he's making some fire dry sift, it looks like. But yeah, it's all about the nitrile glove.
Yeah. Do you see a future for dry sift in the rec market, or do you feel as though that's something that's going to stay, you know, for the makers and the heads?
Yeah, rec market, no. Don't ever see it happening. I don't believe that you can mechanize that process and get it that clean that you can by hand. Whereas the water hash, I believe you can mechanize. I just don't see how it would be possible. Now, the one time, what's that?
What about front loading the process, like mechanizing part of it and then doing the real detail work by hand?
Yeah, that I think could be done. That I think, you know, like you could definitely
mix tech, yeah.
Use a tumbler, you know,
like Sonic tech.
See, now there's I don't want to like give anything out or anything like that, but I've had conversations, and again, it was this guy with the nitrile glove. Like, I think this dude knew some people and knew some shit, you know, but just was like, Sam doesn't want his picture taken kind of guy.
Yeah.
I think sound waves, sonic waves, something like that. I think, you know, you've seen the YouTube videos with the guy with the metal table and the sound and the sand.
Yeah.
You know, like, I think there's definitely something there with that. I had a friend who was going to try and build me something a few years ago, but the dude just kind of flaked on me. And we were going to try and, you know, he was a sound engineer or whatever, and do like a frequency sweep on it, you know, and see if it changed anything.
Yeah.
I have a theory that somebody may have been already doing this and doing it for a while.
Yeah, I think there's a few theories like that going around.
And that's why he's the GOAT. But I don't want to, you know, I can't say whether or not, because I have no idea how.
Yeah, for sure. The the California market's in a pretty tough spot right now. What do you foresee happening over the next 1 to 3 years?
I see only a few big players being left. They are definitely cornering and monopolizing the market, which is, in this capitalist society, the only thing you can expect, honestly. That's why federal legalization is the last thing any of us want. Last thing. Maybe deschedule and leave it to the states, but if the feds legalize, we're all done. Like, now there's 3 or 4 guys that can play because they're lining everybody's pockets. You know what I'm saying? You know how it works in this country. Money talks.
Absolutely.
So, and the corporate greed is immense. And at the end of the day, unfortunately, the average consumer that goes into a store to buy cannabis is proving that they want Budweiser quality products. Yeah. That's the average consumer that goes into a dispensary, not the average consumer, because I think the average consumer that goes into a dispensary is probably a smaller percentage of the cannabis users out there.
Yeah. What would be one lesson that you wish you had learned earlier in your hash making career? Was there something that really stood out to you that once you learned it, it was, things got a lot easier and you said, God damn it, I wish I knew that sooner?
I don't think I have necessarily the one like I wish I did type thing, but I do have, because I think just from working construction and who I am, I already had the mindset that if you want to do this and you want to get into this and you want to be successful at this, especially, and now this may only specifically pertain to coming out to like Northern California and getting into the industry, but you need to be humble, you need to be respectful, and you need to understand that nobody owes you anything. If you get a job as a farmhand, you are an employee that is paid by the hour, if that is the deal.
Yeah.
You may think your boss is rolling in money. He's probably not. So don't get people. I see too many people start to get greedy and think that they're somehow owed something because they helped grow the crop as like an employee, and you absolutely are. You're owed payment for your time and effort. But especially in the last few years, things have really changed as far as the money side of things. So, and this ran true back when there was money to be made. You need to be respectful and understand you're not owed anything, and put in your time and put in your work and just be honest and just put out fire. And the rest will probably take care of itself.
So let me ask you, can you just one second, sorry.
Yeah.
So just to ask, kind of circling back, so your favorite thing to do with your head stash is straight melts. And is that straight Davies melts? Or
it's not straight melts, and honestly, because I'm more of a smoker and I prefer to actually smoke joints versus dabbing. Okay. I tend to go for more like spliff hash, believe it or not.
Oh, word. Okay.
And that's more, that's more of a recent thing, I would say.
So dabbing
year or so.
Less.
Yeah, definitely. But I do, the majority of it would be melt, and then there's always a few really good flavors of rosin in there. And it depends on if I'm lazy and I don't want to clean the banger. I'll probably just grab the rosin.
What are the?
I'll be honest.
What are the 3 most impressive extracts that you've come across this year, Todd? Be it cultivated by yourself and processed, or someone else.
So one that I'm gonna have to think.
So one, though, I know of was just given to me last weekend at the Regen camp thing. And it's very rare. Like I said, it's, you know, that whole people handing you jars thing. Like, I get it now that I'm on the other side of the fence. It's, you know, like 1 in 100 that just drops that like whoa on you. I can't remember the kid's name, but it was Calyx Creations grew and washed it, and it was Tropaya, and it's extraordinarily good. It checks every box, man. It's got the punch, it's got the flavor, it's super pretty, it's clean. Like, yeah, definitely all about it. And then I think the Le Mans number 7 from Kush Kirk, when I went up there to try, when I was up there, and he made me pick my favorite of the Le Mans phenos, and I had to run the Le Mans hash gauntlet. That number 7, I'm all about. It's like the lemon tree terps, you know, and then all gas, and like those lemon tree terps are pretty rare in hash. I think they're becoming a little more common, but all about that. And then the Sour D that I ran this year, like, I'm a huge fan of Sour Diesel, always have been, and it impressed me. When I impress myself, then I'm like, okay, we're on to something, because I'm super critical. I'm always like, oh, I don't even know if I should be putting this out, and everybody else is like, bro, are you kidding me? This is fire, you know? And I'm like, I don't know. So I think those would probably be the 3 from this year.
That's awesome, man. Can you tell us a story about the bear that destroyed your RV and your wife's car?
That's funny because she's sitting right next to me. That's a sore subject, man. Yeah. So up at the hideout, we had a bear. Like, Joey knew that there was a bear that lived around there. Like, they thought it lived towards the top of the property, because we were at like 3,000 feet, but it went up. The property went up probably another almost 1,000 feet. I'm gonna take a guess, and I think he lived up there. But the first time he came around, was it the RV first, or did he break into the building first?
The RV first.
Oh, okay. So I had the RV parked like down by the gate, which is pretty far from the cabin we were staying in. And my wife had just moved out here, and, you know, she pretty much was living in the city. So now I got her way up in the hills and on these crazy dirt roads, and the road into the hideout wasn't in super good shape. So we were parking her car by the gate next to the RV. And sure enough, we go down there one day, and the RV window is broken, like over the sink. And her car has bear paw prints on it, and he crawled up on the roof of her car to break the window to get into the RV, and the only thing in there was like syrup or something like that, which of course a bear is going to go for syrup. And he, I think, proceeded to sit on the top of her car and eat that thing because there was syrup all over her car too. But it dented the roof, and it has a sunroof. So basically, if we wanted to run it through insurance, they would total the car, even though it's like 2 little dents and you can't open the sunroof anymore. But then that same bear came back. I'm assuming it was the same bear. And we heard a bunch of ruckus one night outside, and I went out there to scare him off, because Joey's told me all these horror stories about bears, like, just beelining through the center of the garden, like right through the trellis and everything, and like just pulling all that with them. So they just rip all the plants out with the trellis, and like you got a bear running with a line of trellis hanging behind him with plants, you know. So I went to scare him off. We go down there the next day, and he broke the window and was trying to get in the door, and the only thing in the building was gasoline. And then I had a bunch of people tell me that bears go crazy for gas. Like, at some point in their life, they like came across it and got high off of it or something, and like they go crazy for gas, I guess. I had never heard that, and I don't know if it's true, but yeah, he made a mess, man.
That's too funny, man. I was lucky enough to hang out with Josh and Kelly, and I mentioned that we had an interview coming up, so they messaged Joey and they were like, what would be like a question that would trip him out? So that was my blast from the past.
I was like,
you were like, how's this guy know this?
I was gonna say, how do you know?
Yeah, no, the other story that he mentioned me to ask you about is the first time you were teaching Joey to wash hash. He said that it was quite an ordeal. But
yeah, he didn't know what the hell he was doing.
But yeah, I can only imagine. I wanted to ask you, Todd, as we kind of wrap things up, what are you excited about for this coming year? I know you're getting your Hugos in. You're probably what are you planting? Or do you have some cultivars you're excited to grow? Are you going to be pheno hunting? What's up for this year?
Yeah, so we're doing everything I'm doing outside over here this year's all going to be from seed. I got a pretty good list of stuff. I got some Chili Verde from HBK going in, even though he just gave me his breeder's cut of Chili V. So now I'm on the fence if I'm going to even throw those out, but I probably should. I got some, oh my gosh, some Full Melt from Bloom Seeds. Some Chem de la Kush from Pure Melt. God, what's the one from T Beazle? I got one of T Beazle's strains, and I'm totally having a brain fart right now.
The shallot
What's
sashimi?
that? No, I didn't get the shallot sashimi. I think I might have one. Expiration date.
Oh, nice.
That's it.
That's awesome.
I got the expiration date. Then I've got quite a good number of my 24K number 2, the 24K cut that I kept from the hideout, bred with a male that we found that year. So I want to kind of go through and see if I can maybe find a better version of it, because it's, again, talking about selections. I mean, it was the first time I ever kept anything, and it was like, damn, like this thing makes great hash, and like I'm leaving the farm, I need I need something that washes. So I took the 24K. It's super finicky. It's not the easiest plant to deal with. So I'm seeing if maybe I can find one that's a little bit easier to deal with that still, has the terps in there. And then I've got this Pure Kush by Chem Valley Kush by Strawberry Kush. I'm kind of excited about. It's pretty old genetics from up on like Spy Rock. I'm hoping to find some like super gassy heaters in there. And then, I know I'm missing some. I'm sure I'm missing something, but every year you got to kind of reacclimate yourself with the strains you're going to grow and
for sure
memorize them.
Absolutely. So, Todd, where's the best place for people to find you, follow you, and stay up to date with what you're doing?
I think the best place is going to definitely be Instagram. I don't do any other social media than that. I'm at resin_ranch_extraction. So resin ranch extraction.
We'll definitely post
stories
in the link for sure. And man,
awesome.
I really enjoyed chatting with you, bro. Like I really enjoy you taking time. I can see you got a ton going on, and it was really cool to have you on.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on too. This is one I'm going to have to watch more of your episodes, because a few people that I told were like, damn, you're going to be on Fire In, Fire Out. Cool. So,
yeah, man.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Passion speaks.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Make sure you join us this Wednesday, April 27th, 6 p.m. We're going to have another episode with the Real Cannabis Chris. Nice. We're stoked. And really appreciate your time, Todd. We definitely would love to have you back. Awesome. And have an awesome day, man. Appreciate you.
You guys enjoy. Thank you.
Don't forget to
man.
Have a good night, guys.